Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm coming to you by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. This is Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1639 of the War News Stream. And today we have extremely big news coming out of NATO, and it's starting to look like things are taking a very sharp turn for the worse today, as we've seen that Russia has targeted a NATO gas facility in Romania with apparently a sea-based attack drone, and thankfully they were able to shoot it out of the water before it was able to hit the target. And also, explosions have erupted at a major Russian Navy port as well, and also Finland was violated by a Russian military jet as well at the exact same time. And I would say a lot of huge escalations, but it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments, particularly from NATO's eastern flank today, also including the war in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia to some extent. As we have been able to hear that overnight, several Russian drones have once again impacted the territory of the state of Romania, once again overnight, near to the city of Galati, and additionally, a Russian unmanned surface vessel appears to have attempted an attack against the Neptune oil rig platforms and drilling rigs off the coast of Romania, which was responded to by a Romanian Air Force F-16, which used its main gun to destroy the unmanned system vehicle before it was able to hit the Neptune oil rigs and platforms off of the coast of Romania within Romania's territorial waters. We have also been able to additionally hear, outside of these developments inside of the state of Romania, that within Germany, news has emerged today that the Russian Federation has actually parked the Admiral Kasatonov off the coast of the Federal Republic of Germany, a Russian frigate that is armed and equipped with hypersonic missiles, including the Zircon hypersonic missile, which is currently just hanging out around 12 miles outside of the German coastline and only 2 miles outside of German territorial waters. NATO has finally confirmed 72 hours in that NATO has been conducting a military exercise involving land and air assets within the Republic of Poland near to the area of Kaliningrad, with another significant presence of NATO aircraft and refueling tankers being seen in the air today. We have also been able to hear that there's apparently been a ground element of which we have not been able to account for of the Polish armed forces and possibly others that have been involved near the Kaliningrad area. NATO has stated that this is not directed at the Russian Federation, although the scope of the military exercise quite literally encircles the Kaliningrad Military Oblast, or the Leningrad Military Oblast of the Russian Federation. Simultaneously, while all of this was going on in Germany, Poland, and Romania, Finland has now stated that there was a high likely airspace breach conducted by a Russian fighter aircraft today within their western airspace in the Gulf of Finland, after it appears that a Russian aircraft veered into their airspace, flew through it for a duration of time, somewhere around a minute or longer, and then flew back out of their airspace and back into the international airspace on the international corridor throughout the Gulf of Finland. This is the largest amount of singular instances, or for that matter, Russian developments and actions that have been conducted in a singular 24-hour period that we have seen throughout the entirety of the channel's coverage of the war in Ukraine and the ongoing tensions between NATO and the Russian Federation. It does appear that as of today, the tensions are starting to run exceedingly high, and at this moment, both sides appear to be preparing for what is expected to be significant escalations that are highly likely going to be beginning in the fall, which may possibly lead into a full-blown confrontation. While all of this has been going on NATO's eastern flank, the armed forces of Ukraine have continued to inflict significant casualties onto the Russian Federation's armed forces, supply lines, and critical infrastructure within the occupied territories and near to the port of Novorossiysk. We have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation's oil and fuel resources have largely ground to a complete halt and a collapse today, as some oblasts are only getting 15% of the fuel that they require for normal day-to-day operations economically, and even the Moscow city area is seeing that 2 out of every 3 gas stations, and in some parts of the city, 3 out of every 4 gas stations are shut down without any fuel available, and the remaining gas stations that are open are usually only selling 1 octane type or may not even have any diesel available within most of the city, showing that the fuel crisis has entered what can only be described as a near nation-ending sort of a development. While all of this has been going on inside of Eastern Europe, we've also been able to hear of major developments within the Middle East as well, as the Islamic Republic of Iran is now apparently working, according to some anonymous officials from Iran who reported to the press today, to try and force the United States of America back into a military confrontation before the midterms, to be able to try and conduct some sort of a political campaign in the United States of America to see that the presidential administration and his party would possibly lose the election due to the horrific outcome of the conflict against Iran and the fact that the Iranians would be able to force a more resounding sort of a defeat than they already have so far. At the same time, the U.S. government is still trying to ignore the situation and move forward with economic warfare, and have implemented some additional sanctions against the Iranians today. Not in anything incredibly large, mind you all, but the Iranians have cried foul and decreed that the U.S. is trying to kill them with these sanctions, which were once again tantamount to largely banning the importation of hamsters into Iran, and they are now declaring that they will be conducting vengeance, largely setting up their own justification for a resumption of military activities and conflict with the United States and its Gulf allies within the Middle East. We have also been able to hear that another UK MTO incident was reported off the coast of Yemen, as an oil tanker was hijacked over the course of this day, and the Israeli Defense Forces are continuing significant bombardments of Hezbollah forces within southern Lebanon. It also appears that the Syrian government, in a side note, has also been getting a heavy and additional support from the Republic of Turkey, as the Republic of Turkey is now assisted in bringing back an airfield from the dead near to the area of Abu ad-Duhur, and appears to have actually paved over the runway and returned it back to an operational status for the new Syrian interim government to use, most likely for their air forces at some point in the immediate future. Outside of these developments in the Middle East, we've also been able to get some brief updates from East Asia, as the People's Republic of China has openly stated they believe that the U.S.'s economic warfare campaign against Iran won't work, and crazily enough, but this is one of the few times I think I'd ever agree with an assessment from the Communist Chinese. And we've also been able to hear that the Republic of Korea's armed forces in South Korea have been put on a state of high alert after North Korea has fired nearly 10 ballistic missiles into the surrounding seas, especially the Sea of Japan, over the course of just the past 24 hours. So showing a significant escalation by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea against South Korea. And we may be seeing that at some point along the DMZ, escalations and also provocations may continue to rise, much like we saw about 1.5 to 2 years ago here on the channel. But of course, folks, we have a humongous amount of news to cover from around the world, and even a little bit of news from the Americas. And we're going to be making sure to get into each and every single piece of this news and cover it with as much detail as we can, as today's events...
Also, by the way, I see a lot of people in the chat. They're saying, "Is this title actually accurate?" Like that's a bold title right there to be saying. It sounds like World War III starting. I don't count on World War III starting, by the way, just because NATO's getting, obviously some aggression from Russia. That does not guarantee World War III because so far NATO's been very passive about stuff like this. But I will admit, though, it seems like Russia is starting to go for it. They're really starting to do a lot of incursions back to back, and that really lines up with the NATO reports and the intelligence articles that have been coming out saying that Russia plans on attacking somebody soon. So it seems like they're getting close to actually pulling something bigger off.
It certainly does appear so, and while folks, a lot of people read the title and they immediately assume we're trying to say that war is coming. Folks, this is not a certain kind of a channel that says the nuclear bombs are flying and everyone's dying. We're just reporting the news. If the news doesn't sound good to you and you think it sounds like World War III is close, that's just your opinion. That's not what we're saying. We're just literally stating the developments that have happened today, which don't sound good on the face of it alone. So getting us on into all of that major news of the day and actually covering the title's main headliner for the day, it's now time for us to move on into our largest news, which is directly affecting NATO's eastern flank. As many of y'all will know, over the past several weeks, if not months, we have been able to hear a large number of NATO intelligence sources from Poland, the European Union, Britain, the United States of America, the Lithuanian intelligence, Ukrainian intelligence, and largely every other intelligence apparatus within the whole of Eastern Europe has been sounding alarm bells and stating that they are getting clear intelligence that the Russian Federation is largely attempting to create a larger escalation at some point within the autumn, and they will be attempting at some point in the future to conduct a direct drone and missile attack against NATO states or major provocations to try and weaken the psychological connection in the NATO alliance and further decrease the ability of NATO to be able to respond, or to actually attempt a larger offensive or full-scale war against NATO at some point in the fall. Since those reports have come out, we have started to notice that the Russian Federation is conducting more and more small-end escalations against the NATO states over these past several weeks, if not the past 2 months. And we've now seen that the largest string of escalations and escalatory actions that could be conducted in a 24-hour period has been conducted today. Moving us on into Romania, which is generally the hot point of the day, we were able to see that in the midst of Russia's drone and missile attack against Ukraine last night, there was a significant number of drones that actually crossed over into Romania, with one of them impacting near to the town of Grindu, just a couple of kilometers away from the city of Galati, which was a city that was previously hit directly by a Russian Shahed 136 drone, which hit the top floor of an apartment building, wounding 2 Romanian citizens in the process of that attack. We were able to hear today that another Russian drone had entered Romanian airspace and crashed in Romania's Tulcea County, and the drone crossed into Romanian airspace near Galati at 3:21 in the morning before crashing around 4 kilometers northeast of Grindu in an unpopulated area. 2 Spanish F-18s were scrambled as a part of the NATO air policing operation in the area, while a Romanian IAR-330 SOCAT helicopter was deployed to monitor the situation. No casualties or material damage was reported, and the area has been secured by Romanian military personnel. From what we understand, the drone was another Shahed 136 armed with a warhead that did end up impacting to the northwest of Grindu, which actually be in this farm area around here just to the east of Galati, and apparently exploded in one of those fields, causing damage to the field, but not causing any direct material damage to any structures or any casualties of the Romanian citizenry. However, this is clearly another provocation by the Russian Federation, as these sorts of drone incursions and armed attacks, as we could call them, against Romanian territory have become pressingly more common, almost a near daily occurrence at this point in recent times. Not only that, we were also able to hear that other Russian drones near to the port of Renai on the Ukrainian side of the Danube, only several kilometers away from the Romanian drone incident where the drone actually impacted Romanian soil, there was another incident that actually happened in Moldovan territory, as a report came out that during the overnight attack on the Ukrainian port of Renai, the drone incidents were also recorded near Moldova's border. 2 separate incidents were reported near Girguliseti, if I'm pronouncing that correct. In one case, an explosion on the Ukrainian side near the border caused a fire that spread into Moldovan territory. In the second, Moldovan border police found the drone debris around 1 kilometer inside of Moldovan territory. Preliminary analysis identified the remains as belonging to to a Garand-type drone, aka what we call here on the channel a Shahed 136, including the engine and other components. This incident occurred during the Russian attacks on the port of Renai last night, and these pictures here stand as the evidence of the direct impact inside of Moldovan territory from the incidents and generally the larger attack that happened last night that not only attempted to hit the Ukrainian port of Renai, but spread on over and started to hit territory inside of the Republic of Moldova and also the state of Romania as well. While all of that was going on, which is largely normal fare at this point, as far as Russian provocations against NATO, we were able to hear of an entirely different one that happened today off the Romanian coastline, as we have now heard that Romania attempted to destroy, correction here, folks, let me make sure to read this correctly. Romania just destroyed a Russian unmanned surface vehicle, or an unmanned drone vessel, in the Black Sea, only a few hundred meters from the Neptune deep gas operations site. The drone was detected in Romania's exclusive economic zone around 80 miles east of Castana, close to the offshore infrastructure where several hundred people were working. For the first time in the incident, 2 Romanian F-16s were scrambled with orders to fire at the drone and to destroy it before you hit the Neptune gas facilities. Romanian Defense Minister Radu Maruda says the drone was loaded with explosives and that Ukraine officially confirmed through a newly established communication channel that it was not in fact Ukrainian. A Romanian military command cell coordinated the response with NATO involved at the command level. This is particularly significant because the Neptune Deep is a critical energy infrastructure, and Romania expects the project to become a major source of gas once production begins. And this is not happening in isolation. Earlier this month, Romanian forces also destroyed 2 Gerbera-type drones found drifting near the same offshore project, which we covered previously. We actually have a video showing the F-16s intercepting and destroying the vessel off of the coast from a vessel that was apparently nearby. Here's the clip actually showing the F-16 roaring in overhead from the Romanian Air Force and firing on the drone with a 20mm gun, destroying the vessel before it hit the Neptune gas operations offshore. Here's the clip. There goes the F-16 overhead, flying directly towards the USV off in the distance. You can then see that the cameraman is zoomed in. And we can see the cannon's impact on the water and the sound of the gunfire.
Oh, wow. Well, it's good to see they're actually, firing at the drones now, because, before they were very hesitant to fire at anything that they thought was Russian that came into Romanian airspace or even their waters. I don't really think they've ever had an incident where something has floated into their waters like that, like especially an attack drone like that. That's much rarer than an aerial drone flying into Romanian airspace. So it's good to see they're shooting the stuff down at least.
From what I think we can document, I think this is the first time ever that a Russian attack boat drone has ever entered Romanian waters, whether it be their exclusive economic zone or territorial waters. I think in prior times we have heard of a couple of Ukrainian drones that apparently went errant or were shot and went adrift after Russian fire hit them, floating into Romanian waters, but this is the first ever time we've heard of a Russian incident, and especially near to such a critical infrastructure site like the Neptune gas project. You can actually see one of the dredgers over there on the left side, making this a historic first as far as an escalation that Russia has conducted as of recently. But moving us on out of that bit of news in Romania and painting an even larger picture that doesn't just include Romania, but includes the rest of the region, we have been able to confirm finally, folks, what is going on with the NATO operations or air operations that have been ongoing around Kaliningrad over the past 2 days and have now gone into their 3rd day today. To show y'all really quickly what the airspace situation looked like, we were able to confirm that more NATO AWACS aircraft, refueling tankers, and other assets were once again in the air, and we are assuming that with those refueling tankers, there was most likely multi-role aircraft that were operational and being refueled from the tankers, which were airborne during this time earlier today. According to reports that finally came out from NATO, 72 hours in, they have finally stated that they have confirmed that large-scale exercises are ongoing in northern Poland, including ground forces from the Polish military, and officials claim it is not in response to any developments with the Russian Federation. A little bit hard to believe that, but it is once again finally a confirmation that NATO is conducting military exercises around the Kaliningrad Military Oblast, which we had a great deal of questions as to what was going on over the past 3 days, and we've finally been able to get an answer today. While a lot of people are generally hearing the news, or more so interesting development about that military exercise, a lot of people right now are talking about the situation in Romania, which is quite a large and concerning one, considering that once again, as normal, we are seeing Russian drones drones crossing the border and impacting inside of Romanian farm fields near to major cities on the Danube. And for the first time ever today, we've seen the Romanian Air Force engage and destroy a unmanned drone of the Russian armed forces, which was armed with explosives and came incredibly close, dangerously close, to the Neptune deep sea project. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so this is a pretty serious escalation, and it follows a large series of escalations that we've seen Russia conducting over the past couple of weeks, especially over just the past couple of days. It's really been ramping up in frequency quite a lot. So now we've seen that Romania just destroyed a Russian attack drone, a sea-based attack drone, that tried to explode near their coastal gas facility. So what are your thoughts about that? Did Russia intend to do it, or was it an accident? And it looks like 79% of the audience said Russia intended to strike the site, and they simply failed to do it, while 8% said Russia's drone simply went off course, and about 7% of the audience said I'm 50-50 on this one. And there is no way that a sea-based drone that Russia sent out, that's an attack variant of a sea-based drone, got within a couple hundred meters of that gas site by accident. There is no way that happened by accident. I saw some people saying, this is clickbait. It's obviously just an off-course drone. Tell me, what are the odds that the attack drone goes all the way from a Russian port, all the way down into the economic zone of a NATO country, goes within 100 meters of a very critical coastal gas facility, and then the F-16 have to shoot it out of the water before it's able to explode? That does not look like an accident. I'm not sure how anybody can write that off as an accident. So I would say Russia definitely intended to strike the site, but they simply failed to do it because apparently they couldn't explode it on time or something like that. I don't really know why they didn't pull it off. They were literally right there at the site, just a couple hundred meters away, and were not able to do it. So who knows why, but thankfully they weren't able to pull it off. But I'm with the 79%. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, I remember when the Japanese went off course and accidentally ended up at Pearl Harbor. Boy, what a terrible tragedy. Definitely not war starting. They just went off course. They were trying to get down to Guam, but they ended up in Hawaii instead. Outside of the joke, though, I would agree with the 79% clearly. This was an intended strike by the Russian Federation against the Neptune deep sea project. There is no way out of the entirety of the Black Sea that this drone would end up heading directly to one of the most critical infrastructure sites that could be within Romania's exclusive economic zone, where the Russian drone just happened to be within several hundred meters of hitting it, armed with hundreds of kilograms of explosives, and most likely still connected directly to the Russian operators as they watched it drift basically right up onto the facility to where they could blow it up. That's something that doesn't really happen. That's kind of like saying, oh, well, the Russian border guards, they just accidentally unloaded a whole volley into a Polish border guard unit today and killed about 5 of them. It was completely an accident. Or, this Russian tank just ran over a Polish support vehicle near to the border today, just crossed it and then ran over the vehicle and then drove right back. Completely an accident. Russian tankers do that from time to time. And that's not really an accident. That's more so a major diplomatic incident.
And also, when you combine it with all the recent, frequency of escalations that Russia's conducting, like a missile into Poland, drones into Romania constantly, aerial drones, that is. Once you couple all that together, what happened today near the gas site, it is basically undeniable that this was obviously intentional. Not to mention all the intel reports saying that something like this is imminent. I mean, at this point, anybody saying contrary to that is simply sticking their heads in the sand. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia does something a lot worse than this very quick. It seems like Putin is starting to ramp it up so fast that eventually it's going to probably get out of control. I'd imagine something bad's going to happen, and it's going to force NATO to have to respond eventually. I would imagine.
People are saying, oh, it's just an off-course drone. It's like, oh, yeah, sure. It's like, that's just looking at it in a vacuum. It's not looking at the Russian cruise missile that flew into Poland and blew up south of Lublin. It's not looking at the attack at Leipzig that was conducted, apparently, from what we're assuming now, by the Russian FSB or some operatives working on their behalf, trying to attack Ukrainian cargo aircraft at Leipzig. We're definitely not factoring in the Russian drones that have had to be shot down multiple times over Romania and Latvia recently, the airspace incursion in Estonia about 7 months ago, the endless amounts of provocations that we're seeing by the Russians in their foreign ministry. Completely removing all of that from the picture, it might just look like, oh, it just happened to be that the Russian drone just accidentally floated up into Romania's territory. It's not at all like the last time Romania summoned the Russian ambassador. The Russian ambassador basically tantamount said that the Russians were in a state of war, Romania, and these things happen from time to time. When the Russian drone hit and blew up an apartment building in Galati, if we completely remove ourselves from reality and what's been going on over the past couple of months, maybe we can argue a stupid position like this drone was just an errant one that just drifted into the area of one of the most major offshore operations Romania has going on. But the thing is, folks, is that that's being completely goofy. If we look at the pattern that's been created over the past couple of months, this is clearly another Russian provocation. They were attempting and hoping that they could see the drone drift right into the Neptune deep sea complex, hit it, and cause critical damage, and then claim that the drone just accidentally drifted into that area. Quite clearly, the Russians are trying to cause damage without directly showing that they were. If they drove the drone straight into the facility with the motor on, it'd be pretty hard for them to say, well, it was an accident, it just floated in. So, you know, that seems to make a good bit of sense to me. It's quite a deliberate action. But this is not the only one that we've been able to hear of throughout the day. Moving us on back up and into Poland and talking about NATO finally declaring that large-scale exercise, we were able to confirm that with NATO, that they finally confirmed that those large-scale exercises are ongoing in northern Poland, including ground forces from the Polish military, and officials claim it is not in response to any developments on the ground with the Russian Federation, although that's very hard to believe. They've been encircling the Kaliningrad region for days now, literally 3 days. So we can get the clear idea that while NATO is not wanting to admit that this is directed against the Russians, the scope of their air operations recently around the Kaliningrad Oblast clearly indicate this is aimed at the Russians and no one else. And we've also been able to hear additionally off the German coastline in the Baltic that a Russian warship has actually ended up going and apparently mooring directly along the coastline with the Federal Republic of Germany, and Russia, according to the Telegraph, has deployed a warship armed with cruise and hypersonic missiles near a German island in the Baltic Sea. U.S. intelligence reports warned that Russia could test the West's resolve with an attack on NATO within weeks, potentially through a limited strike on Poland or one of the Baltic states. Just to remind everyone once again, we've covered that extensively here on the channel, those intelligence reports that have been coming out over the course of weeks. Now, a lot of people are wondering, what vessel is this? Because that post there didn't really go into a great deal of detail. And I had to do a little bit of sleuthing before the show, folks, to be able to find exactly what vessel this is. And it's one of the newer vessels that Russia actually has. It's the Russian frigate Admiral Kasatonov that is currently apparently operating or moored near to a German island in the Baltic Sea. This is a picture of the vessel in 2021 in the city of St. Petersburg during the Russian naval parades. And this is one of Russia's newer vessels, if we could call it that. The hull was laid down for construction in 2009, and the vessel was commissioned in 2020, meaning that they only had a whopping 11-year construction schedule to build this one frigate, which is a frigate, mind you, with a displacement of 4,500 tons, meaning that this thing is half the size of an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer. While it is only half the size of an Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer, it is a very concerning development because this vessel actually has been refitted to be able to carry the Zircon hypersonic missile, which is usually naval launch, but we now understand that the Russians also have some sort of transport erector launcher that allows for them to fire the Zircon hypersonic missiles from land. This vessel is currently hovering around the coast of Germany at this moment right now, from what we are understanding, and this is a part of the larger picture that we're getting with the military exercise that NATO has going on around Kaliningrad that's apparently involving air and ground forces. We also understand this vessel is parked basically right off the territorial waters of Germany. A Russian drone hit Romania and Moldova last night, and another Russian surface drone almost blew up the largest gas project that Romania has going on off of their coastline. And not only that, not only is this going on near to the coast of Germany, we have also been able to hear that the Finnish government today has put out a statement largely confirming that the Russian Federation and its military aviation have apparently just violated the airspace of the Finnish state in the Gulf of Finland. According to the current information, Finland is investigating a suspected violation of its territorial waters by a Russian military aircraft in the western Gulf of Finland. The border guard is the body that is currently investigating the incident, and the defense minister Antti Hakanen says every suspected violation is taken seriously. So far, whenever the Finnish...
It's just like, what's a suspected violation? It's like, I would assume they made visual contact with it, with another Finnish Air Force aircraft, I would imagine. So it's like what do they mean by suspect? It's like it either entered the airspace or it didn't. And they know if it entered the airspace. They don't need to do a long, drawn-out investigation for that. Once again, it's kind of like this very passive approach to Russia encroaching like this. It's just very passive. It seems like it's kind of a little bit moot.
You know, it's that soft launching stuff like the Germans did. You know, someone launched drones with bombs at the Ukrainian aircraft at Leipzig. I wonder who did it. And then over the next 3 days, they finally quietly say, oh, by the way, it was definitely like a Russian intelligence group. Or with the Romanians, it could be Russian. We'll have to investigate. You can literally see the debris of a Garan on the ground when they say that, like in the pictures. And then 3 days later, oh, by the way, it was Russian. And the same thing the Polish did. A Russian cruise missile flew into their country, blew up in the middle of an attack on Ukraine, and then the Polish government went, tricky stuff these days. We really couldn't know who fired that missile. I mean, hell, it could have been Estonia. So we need to look into this and figure out who it is. And then 3 days later, they go, oh, by the way, it's Russian. This kind of stuff is just saying, the Russians just violated our sovereignty, but we don't want to admit that openly because that's going to send the public into a tizzy. So we're just going to soft launch that and quietly announce that they really did violate our airspace in the next 3 days, probably.
Yeah, honestly, Finland should be Russian because they don't have no time for Stalin right now. This is getting so literally so common, the violations of NATO airspace, that this doesn't even really like hit that hard. Like with this like headline right here, it just kind of seems like, okay, they've invaded the airspace again of a NATO country. So what? It's like, so what's going to happen now? It's like Article 4. I mean, at this point, I mean, Article 4 really doesn't have much like power behind it, really. Like the conference of NATO allies meeting together in person, it really never results in pretty much anything for the most part, except for maybe a military exercise. So I don't even know. Like you see stuff like this and you would think it would provoke something serious, but it really doesn't these days.
Yeah, it really doesn't at all. It's ridiculous how little there is a response at this point to any provocations that Russia conducts. I will say, however, that the war game that's going on, or the military exercise that's currently ongoing around Kaliningrad, is at least a positive sign that they're doing something. But in general, we still see that they do not just announce Russian provocations openly and clearly. They're more than willing to say that Russia is an aggressor state and that they condemn Russia for their ongoing war in Ukraine, but whenever the Russians conduct a provocative action to clearly push the boundaries with NATO, then we want to back off and go, well, maybe they didn't mean to do it. Maybe it's just a little accident. You know, they say they want us all dead every day, and they want to nuke us and kill us all, but maybe it's just a small accident that this time around a Russian cruise missile blew up in our country, or a couple of drones tried to blow up critical infrastructure, or that they have a hypersonic capable frigate currently hanging off the German coast, or that they conducted an airspace violation, all in a 24-hour period. This all happened, folks, within really just the past 12 hours, if we're being entirely honest, which is quite a major development to see, to say the least, considering that almost a given day, we might have a incident that happen in one country, like in Latvia or in Poland or Romania, but today we had an incident that happened pretty much along the whole of the NATO eastern flank. We had one in Romania, one in Poland, and generally, if you want to include Finland in with the Baltics, around the area of the Baltics, there was also an incident today as well. The Russians are clearly working towards provoking an incident with NATO. There's no question about that. World War III didn't start today, for all those people who read a headline and then lose it because it doesn't sound great. World War III isn't starting today, so you can calm down. The nuclear bombers aren't flying, and they aren't sending the codes. But this is certainly starting to move into major provocation territory, without a question. There's no other way to look at that, and looking at it in any other way is just denying the facts and denying reality. The Russians are preparing to try and start a conflict with NATO at some point, or start a major provocation to create a significant diplomatic incident to see if that alone will get NATO to back off of its stance, lift a large amount of its sanctions, and hopefully try and allow the Russians to economically recover to continue the war in Ukraine indefinitely until they achieve some level of success. At the moment, a lot of people are talking right now about this situation with the Russian frigate that is currently hanging off of the coast in Germany and what's going on with that. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it? What are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so in addition to everything else happening, like we just mentioned a moment ago, apparently Russia has put a missile warship near a German island in the Baltic Sea, which is obviously a pretty big escalation in itself as well. Why would you do something like that if you just simply, didn't want to cause an escalation? It seems like something rather provocative, I would say. So what is going on with that deployment? And it looks like about 56% of the audience said it's simply strong posturing by the Russians, and that's all it is. While 34% said a Russian attack is likely imminent, and 5% said it seems like a pretty routine deployment. That's really nothing to be concerned about, pretty much whatsoever. And I would say, I'll be honest, folks. I generally try to err on the side of conservatism when it comes to making predictions like this, but the Russians are getting so desperate, and also their economic situation is deteriorating so rapidly, especially with the gasoline crisis that's making a return with a vengeance inside of Moscow and various other cities inside of Russia. I think Putin is strongly considering attacking somebody. That's my guess at this point. I personally don't think he's going to attack Germany. I don't think he would do that necessarily, but he might attack the Baltics or something that's more of a lower hanging fruit, I would say. So this might just be posturing with the ship getting deployed. But between everything else happening, I think that over the next few weeks, we could see possibly a more serious attack on a NATO country. And I would say that massive NATO deployment of aircraft around Kaliningrad, that is definitely not a military exercise. I can say that with some pretty good confidence behind it. There is some material reason they've deployed those aircraft. It's more than simply an exercise. I think they realize that Putin is starting to get serious, and they might be getting ready to respond to it if he pulls something like that off. That's my guess. So I'm actually with the 34%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I'm generally with the 55%. I think that's largely strong posturing at the moment, but we are definitely getting into the territory of Russia preparing for an attack at some point here in the future. I don't think an attack is going to be coming out, like, when I say an attack, folks, I don't mean like a drone blowing up in Romania, which is technically an attack, or a cruise missile blowing up in Poland. I'm talking about something more large scale and grander in strategy. Say a larger drone or missile attack directed against all the Baltic states and Poland simultaneously, or a large drone and missile incursion or attack inside of Poland. And that's what I'm classifying as an attack right here for the purposes of the poll. I don't think that's going to be coming around anytime in, say, the next few days, but I have a feeling that that's definitely going to be a high possibility coming around into the mid-fall, sometime around October and late September. We're probably going to start seeing that that is very much on the cusp of an action that's going to happen, or it has already happened by that point. This is clearly laying out the groundwork for that, however. The Russians are doing everything they can to desensitize NATO forces, NATO states, and the NATO alliance at large of the incidents they're conducting on a near daily. Because think about it, folks, with what we're covering today, it sounds pretty grand. I mean, a lot of people are coming in here and saying, oh, look, it's clickbait, like another guy. And it sounds extreme. I mean, and quite literally, our title is exactly what happened. I mean, drones hit NATO as Russia deploys forces for war. I mean, generally, that's exactly what happened. I mean, there's a Russian frigate off of the German coast. There were drones that blew up inside of Romanian territory today in NATO, and also they conducted an airspace incursion, and were conducting a war game around Kaliningrad that we couldn't even get to in the title. So the title is dead on accurate. If you think that it sounds clickbait, you're just silly. I don't even know how to explain. I mean, we've literally covered exactly what the title said. That is going to desensitize people, though. That's also going to desensitize politicians that run these countries in NATO. So what is really the difference, folks, between a title like this right here and a title that we might run in October where we say, Russian missiles and drones slam into Poland? There isn't really that much of a difference when you come to think of it. It almost sounds like the same thing. And that's the point. It's trying to desensitize NATO to a degree that when the Russians actually conduct an attack, everybody's trying to figure out, is it really an attack or is it not? Is it more so what the Russians have been doing for months now, or is it actually something legitimately serious? And it's trying to sow those seeds of doubt, and also continue to sow the seeds of doubt in the NATO alliance. Well, if no one's willing to respond to anything right now, why in the world would they respond to anything more serious than this in the future? Because it's really only going to be a step above what we're seeing right now, and no one's even doing anything at this point. So I would say that I'm definitely with the 55%. It's strong posturing, but that is definitely leading on to the 34% that they are preparing for an attack, and it may be coming at some point here within the next several weeks, or, well, not really the next several weeks. It'll most likely be coming sometime by late September or October, like we've been hearing from the intelligence reports over the course of the past several months. But moving us on out of this NATO flank situation that we have been able to hear of today, which is major news to say the least, we have also been able to hear that while that's been going on, in the Russian Federation, the Ukrainians have been able to cause damage in as far as fuel resources that is so extreme that it has become a legitimate crisis. I don't think we've even seen anything come this close in the modern world to happening to a singular country, much less the Russian Federation, which is one of the largest oil-producing countries on the planet currently. The Russian Federation has completely run out of fuel in most regions. From what we've heard today, there is a total fuel collapse in some oblasts, as some oblasts are reporting that only 15% of their gas stations have fuel for sale. And some of those gas stations, even at the 15% level, don't even have every single type of fuel available. They may just have diesel or different or varying grades of gasoline for sale for the public. For at the moment right now, fuel resources across the country, as of the 19th of August, have reached a low of 28%, meaning that 3 out of every 4 gas stations in the Russian Federation don't have a single drop of diesel or a single drop of gasoline in most of the country. Even Moscow is being heavily affected by this crisis at the moment, as we were able to hear that even in the Moscow city area, they are now seeing that only 20%, 1 in every 5 gas stations, has any fuel available. The national average is around 28%, and the Moscow region, not the Moscow city area, is only a couple of percentiles above Moscow city at around 23% fuel availability, meaning that 1 in
What
every 4.
about what about diesel sauce though? It says fuel. Like, well, when they say fuel, are they saying like gasoline, or are they saying diesel too? Because I'm really curious about the diesel stocks, because that affects logistics and all these different transportation companies. So is it just gasoline in this post right here?
This is fuel across the board, so this is diesel and gas availability combined into one.
Interesting. I don't know. Like, it's like, how do they run this low on diesel and diesel sauce and all their favorite fuel products, and they keep the whole supply chain running? It's like we should be seeing food shortages at the stores soon, because I mean, if they can't run the trucks as heavy as they were because they're running out of diesel, then naturally it starts affecting every angle of the supply chain at that point.
Food shortages, you say? Did you just say if they were running low on food, that would prove that they're having a supply issue?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
So let me ask you this. If they weren't able to get fresh food to the stores, like say vegetables and whatnot, and they just had to bring canned food because the reliability of the supply lines is basically collapsing, would that generally prove the point that you're looking for?
Yeah, kinda. You must have something like that. What do we have?
Oh yeah, I do actually. We like quite literally what you're saying here. This guy went into a supermarket today and he actually showed that all of the fresh produce sections have been replaced with nothing but canned vegetables and fruits because the supply lines have quite literally collapsed. So they're trying to bring about around canned preserved foods that can remain in storage far longer at the store because they have no way to keep the supply lines running reliably enough to get fresh produce to the stores. So this guy is actually going to show you exactly what you're looking for. So I'll read you all the subtitles here, folks, while we watch the clip because it's actually a little interesting to hear. But getting us on into the clip, we're going to start right here. Now I'll show you the line for gas. This is Moscow in the Lublino Oblast, or Lublin Street, Rosneft gas station. Look, they're waiting for a gas truck.
Fiending for a gas truck.
It's early evening. Look, all the cars are still there. I'm riding the scooter. Yeah. I don't know why he said that.
Duh.
And it goes. It continues there. On and on. I just arrived at Olchon in Marino, Moscow. See, the shelf with bread is completely empty. Well, there's usually a display of fresh fruits and vegetables. Take a look, it's nothing but boxes of chips.
Uh,
In
it's
other
like,
words,
why are they so worried about covering it up? It's like, yeah, it's almost like the grocery stores are like propaganda outlets at this point. It's like they start stuffing chips in the produce section. It's like, why do they really care if people think that they have produce or not? It's like, wouldn't it just be better just to be upfront with people instead of trying to like stuff chips in the same spot?
honestly, it would be. But man, like, the Russians are so concerned, especially in the Moscow area, about putting out that image that Russia is a lot better off than it really is, that they will go to great lengths to treat the grocery stores here like they're in Pyongyang in North Korea. Beginning us back into the clip, which he also shows some even crazier stuff in the store. In other words, because they don't have any gas, they couldn't even deliver fresh fruit. Let's move on to the next row, where there should be fresh fruit. All the food is canned. Things that can be stored for a long time. We're about to run out of gas. And that's without any bombing of food warehouses. They simply won't be able to deliver the food. Fresh poultry, the shelves are half empty. Where's the bread? Here's some lavash too. Only some of the items are available.
They keep
So,
the poultry on the raw shelf.
man, they do it rough like, man, like
Yeah.
damn.
Well, maybe it is a refrigerator. Is that a refrigerator or just a straight up normal shelf?
It looks like it might be a cooled shelf, but it doesn't look like a refrigerated sort of a deal.
Yeah, I guess that's normal, I guess. It looked like a normal shelf there for me. I was about to say, they keep the poultry out in room temperature. That's kind of like unsafe, but I guess maybe it's not. But yeah, they barely have anything on the shelf right there. That must mean they've reduced the trucks arriving probably like every like week or so or something like that. I don't know. It seems like it's really low.
Man, it's but it is proving exactly what you said. You said, "Oh well, I mean, if they're so low on fuel, then the supply lines ought to be collapsing." Here's proof of it here in Moscow, which is probably in the best condition in the whole country, and most of the shelves are half full or completely empty, or they've had to replace stuff with canned items because they can't get the fresh stuff there reliably. So I mean that's the proof in the pudding right there, or the proof is in the pudding, as some people say. That's the proof right there. I mean, the supply lines quite truly are collapsing in real time at this point.
Yeah, it looks like it is. So, between and also by the way, not to mention we're focusing on the logistics aspect. The logistics collapse is likely imminent at this point because if they don't have diesel, they can't transport trucks to get the food to the grocery store. I said that's a problem. But also keep in mind that there's been this ongoing issue that there's no fuel for combine harvesters for the Russian farmers, and they've not been harvesting their crops. And that's a problem that'll show up a little like later down the road, like a couple of months down the road. That problem will pop up and really start to become apparent. But the problem that's immediately hitting is logistics. So it's about to be a like double whammy when it comes to like all this stuff stacking up on one another. So I don't know, I don't know how big this famine's going to get, but I mean, the fact that Moscow, the largest city in Russia, or one of the largest cities in Russia, is being affected this heavy already, that's definitely not a good sign.
It's certainly not a good sign. And imagine that, man. Like with the agricultural harvest failing because of the high price of food, that's going to lead to skyrocketing prices from scarcity, and it's also going to lead to skyrocketing prices because of scarcity at distribution points because they can't even transport the crops or food they produce to the distribution points that people buy them from. I mean, the prices are going to start skyrocketing to the point that eating might become unaffordable in Russia with that kind of a double whammy hitting them all at the same time there.
Yeah, they might get priced out of food.
Man, that's going to be brutal if that happens. We also were able to hear that apparently at the same time, the Russian Federation is now finally getting Hwasong 11 ballistic missiles from North Korea, which are larger than the KN-23s and the KN-24s. More significantly, around 90 North Korean personnel have reportedly deployed to Russia's Voronezh region to operate up to 6 of these launchers. Pyongyang claims the KN-30 can carry a 2,500 kilogram warhead, although analysts question that figure. There's a good reason to question it. The North Koreans put it out. They bullshit on everything. We also were able to hear a little bit more detail on these missiles, as it does appear that these missiles are in fact in the region and are most likely being operated directly by the North Koreans within the Voronezh Oblast. Sadly, the Ukrainians have not been able to target and destroy any of these transport erector launchers that the North Korean People's Army is operating in Voronezh, but hopefully we'll get some information, news, or proof of that at some point in the future that they're starting to target and destroy these rarer TELs and these rarer KN-30 ballistic missiles, which are now being operated directly by the KPA and the Russian Federation. Moving us on out of that bit of news in Moscow, though, we have also been able to get more proof of the endless lines that are once again forming at gas stations throughout the whole of Russia. These lines, even longer than the last ones we saw at the beginning of the fuel crisis several months ago. I mean, look at this. It's unreal.
That's a gas marathon right there, and those people will be sitting there for days. They might as well go ahead and pack it up and head on back home and forget the gas. They're not gonna get it.
I don't think they're getting anything either. I think that's a lost cause for all those folks. You might as well just go home and figure out where to get the food from the grocery stores. We also got another clip here showing someone driving by another one of these lines at night. Once again, showing the several mile long length of the thing of people just waiting for any gas. Mind you all, this is probably one of the only gas stations running in this part of Russia wherever this was filmed in. Some oblasts in Russia only have 15% fuel availability, meaning that 1 in every 8 gas stations has gas and the remaining 7 do not.
You gotta respect the Russian too that's wasting all their gas driving around and filming the line itself. Like, they're just straight up wasting the gas. Also, they're driving on the completely wrong side of the road too. They're almost like head on colliding with people. Not the brightest, but at least we got the clip out of it.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, man. This kind of reminds me of Utah driving. Man, I mean, honestly, man, this reminds me of that time, man, that I-15 was jacked, and there was nobody like driving down it. It was complete gridlock, and everyone had to try and turn around and get off the interstate on the wrong way. Man, that was brutal. But anyways, moving us on out of that and on out of that little clip, we also were able to see the Ukrainians did hit a refinery in the Tatarstan Oblast, the Teneko refinery, over the course of this day.
Все.
Hopefully,
Oh, yikes.
not good. Not good at all. It is not what you think. So with that is basically all of our news from inside of Russia at this point. We're actually going to be moving on down and into the Middle East here for a moment and covering the brief developments that we have out of that area today. But before we get to that region of the world, though, it does look like a lot of people are talking about the fact that the North Koreans have provided their KN-30 ballistic missiles and also some ballistic missile operators to the Russian Federation in the Voronezh region to be able to conduct even larger ballistic missile attacks against the state of Ukraine. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what should be done, if anything, to the North Koreans? And what are you thinking as well?
Okay, so all of a sudden, out of the blue, North Korea, which is a country that usually has to scrounge for food and it's broke, it's sanctioned to hell and back, all of a sudden it's become a massive manufacturing base for the Russians, and now they're giving even the larger, heavier ballistic missiles to Russia for the first time ever in the midst of all that. So if that doesn't sound off alarm bells in people's heads that there's something more to that story, then I'm not sure what will tip people off. I think that sort of feeds into my theory that somebody's giving North Korea some help, and it's probably China, would be my guess. They're getting some cash infusions from somewhere. But what are your thoughts about that? Because now that North Korea is taking a more, like I would say, a heavier involvement in the war, should something be done to North Korea, or is it a lost cause? 53% said North Korea should be punished somehow, while 25% said North Korea is immune to sanctions. There's not really much to do. And about 16% said North Korea really isn't that important in the whole scheme of things. And right now, I would say that North Korea is in its most strategic phase that the country has ever had in its entire history. And that's not an understatement. North Korea is becoming a pretty big power player regionally, and that's not a good sign. They're now nuclear armed. They're now providing heavy munitions to Russia, and that is not good. North Korea is somehow escalating into a pretty decent sized regional power, which is concerning to say the least, because if there's ever a war that breaks out with China or somebody else, it appears to be that North Korea is a very big asset at this point to the Axis powers, which a lot of people didn't see coming. And I'll admit, I really didn't see it coming this heavily. I mean, North Korea is manufacturing stuff at a rate that's unbelievable, in my personal opinion. So I would say that it's about time that North Korea gets punished. But we're seeing the opposite happen. We're seeing the U.S. try to beg for a meeting with North Korea. They're even scaling back military exercises with South Korea that's aggressing against North Korea. And that makes no sense at all, because North Korea is starting to solidify themselves in a bad way. And the U.S. is really taking an approach of like trying to be friends with them, which is kind of a little bit curious, really stupid idea. So I'm with the 53%. They should be punished in some way. It's just very difficult to punish them because largely they're already sanctioned heavily. So I'm not sure if there is a way, but they should at least look into it. But Enforcer, what say you?
North Korea is actually the most heavily sanctioned country on the planet. There is basically nothing more that we can do to sanction North Korea at this point, because we have thrown every sanction in the book at them about 20 years ago when it was found out that they had a nuclear weapon, when they tested it and announced that they had successfully created a usable nuclear warhead. So there sadly isn't really a lot that we can do in terms of economic sanctions to bring North Korea to its knees, because there's literally no more sanctions to throw at them, and we also cannot conduct any direct military action against them because they're nuclear armed. And not only are they nuclear armed, they also have intercontinental ballistic missiles that can hit anywhere within the United States, including the lower 48, the entirety of the lower 48. So there isn't really a lot we can do. I would be with the 53% that we should punish them, but there's really no actual way we can punish them, because if we bomb them, they might nuke someone. They might nuke South Korea, Japan, or the United States of America. If we end up sanctioning them, there's not really anything we can do. That's not even really an existing option. We can't even throw additional sanctions on them. We've thrown quite literally every single sanction we have on them already, meaning there's no further place to go at this point with North Korea. So really honestly, we're kind of at a dead end. We can't do anything against them. And they have definitely started to show that while they run low on food, and we aren't joking all the time that they are the army of the starving, one thing that they do have is apparently a large, and we've known this for a very long time, this has been well known in the public, they have an incredibly large war industry that exists inside of North Korea, because while North Korea is devoid of arable land to be able to grow any food on, they do have a humongous amount of natural deposits of iron, coal, and other vital resources that would be needed to produce steel, and then from steel, other weapons of war that they could use. We also understand that because of this prosperity that they're getting from the war with Russia, they have been starting to modernize their country and grow out their industrial base and industrial capabilities in the country, thus making them an even more threatening sort of a rogue state within the region. And they've also been using that money that they've been getting from the Russians and material support to try and buy stuff from China, of which we do not know the actual variety of. They could be buying advanced computer and electronics components that they are putting into their missile systems and weaponry to make them more potent or more accurate than their designs originally intended for and their original iterations, which could also become increasingly concerning if the North Koreans ever consider the possibility of a conflict directly with South Korea, which the US 8th Army is permanently stationed in at this point. So generally not a good situation for us to be in. And sadly, folks, while North Korea is an enemy of the Republic, in reality, there's just really nothing we can do against them. We've already done everything we can, and we're kind of sitting at that point, and there's no further place to go rather than going directly to war with them, which could lead to some sort of a nuclear confrontation, because the regime is highly unstable, and any amount of additional instability could lead them to start conducting nuclear actions preemptively against a allied nation or the United States. But moving us on from that bit of news and that situation with North Korea, it's now time for us folks to move on down and into the Middle East and to cover all the developments that we've been able to see from here today. Now, before we get on into this though, I do have to say, YouTube's finally showing the viewer count number, thank goodness. And also, we got to thank y'all greatly for having been here and watching the show tonight. I hope that it's been a fairly good one so far, and that people have been enjoying the show and hopefully getting a little bit of important information out of it. And I also got to give a humongous shout out to the 18.4 thousand people who were here at the peak tonight and the 67,000 people who have watched this show in the first hour. We're always entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many of y'all consider this channel to be a primary source of news. And we love to know that we're able to report the news to all of y'all with the highest accuracy possible, with the best analysis we can possibly provide, given the circumstances, and also making sure to hopefully throw in a little bit of humor with it here and there to make it a little bit more digestible and not overwhelming, because the world is quite an overwhelming place these days if you take it as it is, so you kind of got to add in a little bit of humor here and there to make it a little bit more tolerable. But before we move on into all of our news that we have from the Middle East, and speaking of which, folks, we actually have some news about North Korea today, and also a lot more to cover from the ongoing war in Ukraine and a little bit of news out of the Panama Canal. Before we get into all of that, I do want to make sure that we take a brief moment to give thanks to all of y'all for watching and spending your an hour here at least so far by taking a moment to get 3 questions from the chat and getting to talk to a couple of y'all before we move on into the rest of our news. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's not Thanksgiving, but it's time to give thanks to our first 3 super chatters of the night. And of course, if you threw in a super chat, we will get the rest of them during our last question segment. But to grab our first 3, the first one's going to go to Nick Hines. He puts in a 100 smackaroo support. And thank you very much, Nick, for that very generous $100 super chat. And we do appreciate that. That is the largest one of the night. He said, do you think Russia is doing these attacks to NATO for Putin to try to make his citizens focus on something other than the Ukraine war? And at this point, when not if Article 5 is enacted, what would you awesome guys do to Russia and LSA Eternal?
I thank you massively for the incredible support, Nick, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I would say I don't really think they are doing this for the benefit of the Russian people, because the Russian people, from what we know, don't really hear a great deal about the provocations Russia is conducting against NATO on the daily, at least from the little bit we get to see of their media space. They hear more so generally a concocted narrative about the whole situation. They're fighting NATO in Ukraine. It's a slog, but they're winning every day, and all of the setbacks in Russia are only temporary ones. They'll all pass within a couple of weeks, and everything's going fine, and they need to hate, like, the boogeyman in Ukraine, and Zelensky, who's the big evil one. That's generally the narrative that they get, and they still get it at this point on the daily from most Russian media sources. And if a Russian media source is veering off of that, the Russian government will whip them back into line pretty quickly, from what we can tell. So Generally, we haven't seen that they've been talking about this a lot to distract the Russian people with it. What I think it is, I think it's just Russia getting ready to start something against NATO, and they're trying to get the groundwork ready for it. Because if Russia admitted, for example, that, hey, we blew up a drone in Romania deliberately, and they said that on state media, then that largely is as a confirmation by the Russian government that they hit NATO deliberately and it was an armed attack, not just an incident, like they kind of explain it away to be so far right now. So that's why we don't really see that a lot in the Russian media space, because while it is the Russian domestic media space, that can be reflected on them internationally. Now, as far as the other part is concerned, however, about an attack from, say, the Russian Federation, I don't know when Article 5 is going to get enacted at this point by NATO, if ever. I think I think we're quite truly in a world where Article 5 will only be activated if the Russians conduct a massive drone and missile attack against Poland or the Baltics that is about as large as the ones they conduct against Ukraine. And I think at that point they might try and declare Article 5. But by then it's probably too late. They probably have
Oh,
the
yeah.
advantage because they have the element of surprise. And then we're going to be fighting a defensive war and trying to turn it back around into a counteroffensive conflict on our end. But Matthew, what are you thinking?
Well, I think what Nick is asking, that second part right there, he's saying when, not if, Article 5 is enacted. So he's saying, what would, if we were in charge, what would we do in the instance that Article 5 was enacted and it was time for collective defense and NATO had to do something to act against Russia in response to an attack? What I would do is I would immediately seize Kaliningrad if I was in charge. I would say Kaliningrad's going to be NATO's. We're going to take it. The Suwalki Gap is going to be secured as well. That's the first thing I would do. So that way Russia can't start launching attacks or cutting off the Baltics. I would immediately go into Kaliningrad if I was in charge personally. That would be the first step. And obviously at that point, that's obviously a huge escalation. So it's going to be a full-on situation at that point. So we better have a very good basis for doing that, because once we decide to take an action like seize Kaliningrad, it's on at that point. There's no turning back. So it would have to be a very strong circumstance to do something like that. And since we're seeing this major NATO aircraft deployment around Kaliningrad, I think it's fair to say that Russia has some forces that are moving around or being deployed inside of that Russian enclave, which is fair to say based on the deployments of the aircraft. So that's what I would do.
So, with that being the question of mine, this might take a couple of minutes, but I'm going to try and make it short. What I would do if we're talking about the actual details of a military operation is that, as the United States of America, because I would only unfortunately be the president of the U.S., so I wouldn't be able to be the president or imperator of the whole of NATO. But if I was the president of the United States, I would be telling NATO states on the eastern flank that we are entirely supportive of them in their actions, and if they want to make statements directed at the Russians in a more concerted or spearheaded sort of a way, the United States supports them fully militarily. I would also be looking to further deploy more forces of the United States armed forces into EUCOM at this point to be able to prepare for that conflict, including an expansion further of the U.S. Army in Europe and Africa, most likely adding a whole other corps to their command structure, rather than just 5th Corps, which is the only standing corps at the moment. And I would also be trying to make sure that we have an aircraft carrier that is available for deployment to the North Sea at any given point. There would have to be at least one carrier that is free and available for immediate deployment into Europe, because that would be a very important thing if a conflict starts. If a conflict starts, Kaliningrad is largely an air defense and anti-ship missile shield that Russia is able to create that stops NATO forces from freely transiting on land, sea, and air further north to assist Finland, Sweden, or the Baltic states. So that means that is our top priority in the conflict. I would never support the U.S. firing the first shot, but I would support the United States firing the last shot, and that would largely be the plan here. Once Russia fires a actual attack against NATO and we can see that Article 5 is invoked, I would immediately work to conduct a suppression of enemy air defense and an anti-ship missile campaign against the forces in Kaliningrad to clear out their air defense capabilities and also their anti-ship capabilities, allowing for free flow of traffic through the Baltic Sea, allowing for reinforcements and supplies to make it to the Baltics and Finland, which would most likely be embattered and besieged at that point, and an attack into Kaliningrad would most likely have to be conducted to secure the area. On top of that, we also would need to make sure that once NATO forces can break the general closure of the Suwalki Gap, which will inevitably happen, and we kind of have to allow it to happen, NATO forces need to rush northwards and into the Baltics themselves and start pushing into Belarus slightly to create a larger barrier zone and to also prepare for an offensive into St. Petersburg. The St. Petersburg offensive is largely a checkmate at that point. The Russians will start to threaten a nuclear conflict, and we will have to figure out whether they're bluffing or not. And I would tell them you can nuke us, but we can resolve this as a status quo antebellum, and that's what we'll take. We're not giving y'all any concessions, and we're not giving y'all any concessions. Status quo antebellum, and that's all you're getting. And that would be the line. If they aren't happy with that, then we'll take it to wherever it goes. If it goes to a nuclear conflict, unfortunately, it just goes to that. But that would be my stance.
Yeah.
But apparently, Matthew has something else to add.
You know, the easiest thing to do right now, this is the simplest thing that costs little to nothing to do right now. If the United States would simply come out and get some balls and actually tell Russia that they stand 100% behind European NATO allies in this matter, and they're not going to be backing off anytime soon, and completely eliminate all doubt that the U.S. is going to, be showing up when something happens, that would make Putin think twice. But I think the reason why Putin is also feeling more emboldened right now is because there's a huge question of whether or not the U.S. is going to show up and actually fight Russia if Europe gets invaded. That's still a big question mark. So that's the cheapest thing that we could do right now for deterrence. But I don't think the U.S. has the intelligence to do that.
I don't think they do. Honestly, folks, the U.S. doesn't have intelligence right now to pour piss out of a boot if the instructions were on the heel, unfortunately. If we had the intelligence, things would be a lot more forthcoming and easy to do. But that requires intelligence at the top trickling down, which we don't really have at the moment, unfortunately. So I hope that addresses that in both of our regards fairly well. An amazing question, by the way, Nick Hines. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we are on to the next question of this segment.
And this one's going to go to Becca B51, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Becca, as well for the 50. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Becca said LOT LSA and take one from the chat.
Hey, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and a huge thanks to you for support, Becca B51, and we thank you greatly for enjoying the channel, and we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew, from the chat in honor of Becca B51?
So in honor of Becca, this one's going to go to Christopher, who said, why should we help NATO? Have the Europeans helped us at all with Iran? Well, let me explain that part right there. Let me explain that. So NATO is an alliance that consists of mainly European members. That's what that is. And the U.S. is a member of NATO. And Article 5 says collective defense. So if one NATO member is attacked, that's an attack upon them all. That's a treaty. That's an actual charter that exists that the U.S. is a member of. There is no charter that exists that says if we want to go and attack Iran, that NATO has to rush in and start doing an offensive operation against Iran. There is no treaty that exists that says that. That's why the Europeans were not obligated to help us with Iran, and there's no legal basis for doing so. So there's a huge difference. That's why it's very important to know the treaties and the actual legal documents behind it instead of just going off of what the mainstream media or some of these propaganda outlets are saying, because there's no logic behind that. But Enforcer, what say you?
NATO is a purely defensive alliance. The war with Iran was a defensive conflict from the United States side. It also is outside the geographical parameters laid out under NATO protections. It is not within the parameters where NATO would have to respond to an attack against the United States, much less an offensive conflict, which NATO is not designed for. We get a lot out of Europe. Europe was the one who responded and actually invoked Article 5 on our behalf after 9/11 and went with us on the war on terror into Iraq and Afghanistan. The British were there with us extremely every step of the way throughout the beginning of the war in Afghanistan and throughout a decent amount of the duration of the war in Iraq. On top of that, we get a great deal out of Europe in the terms of trade that we get. I'm sure that the car that you're driving is probably not American made. It's probably made either in East Asia or it's made in Europe, because crazily enough, that's where most of our automobiles come from, or at least the companies that design and sell the automobiles that are here in the United States. We have a $1.5 trillion annual trade with the European Union, which makes a humongous sum of money for people like you and gives people like you a job, because the economy is turning at a greater rate because we're trading, we're receiving more goods, which makes more money, which allows for us to reinvest more money into growing the economy, and that leaves you employed and having a job. So if you want anyone to think for your job, you ought to be thanking our allies around the world, which are more than happy to trade with us for the job that you have, because if none of these allies were trading with us, you wouldn't have anything to even eat to be alive right now to ask the question, what do they do for us? They do quite a great deal. That's why the United States of America is in the position it's in, is because for the past 80 years, we have fostered one of the largest and strongest military and economic alliances the globe has ever seen in its history. And if you don't want any further proof of that, why in the world do the Chinese want to become friends with Europe and kick the U.S. influence out of Europe if they're nothing but a leech? Why in the world would the Chinese want to take on such a tremendous burden for really no gain or no reason? That's because the whole statement that Europe provides nothing and we get nothing from them is a load of crock and bogus said by, unfortunately, unintelligent people in the media that have nothing better to do than spin yarns and lies about how useless our allies are and how great our enemies are. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that live chat the best I can. And a big thanks to you for support, Becca B51, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news for the night.
And this one's going to go to James Hughes. And James puts in a generous $50 support. And thank you, James, as well, for supporting the channel and helping to keep it running with that support. And James said, if or when NATO responds, will NATO send troops to Ukraine or attack Russia directly? And given the current condition of the Russian military, I would attack them directly and make them move their troops.
I would say that I would attack the Russians directly. And a lot of people in the chat were saying, well, Enforcer, why in the world will you not send troops into Ukraine to help out the Ukrainians? Well, because it's kind of their conflict and it's kind of their front. They're holding it down. Like, it's like, why do we need to go in and help them when they're holding it down? I mean, if a war starts with Russia, they have fired the first shot. That's how NATO works. Russia has to fire the first shot for us to get into the conflict on a defensive side. That's how I'm looking at it. So if the Russians are invading NATO, we need to stabilize the situation in NATO before we send anyone into Ukraine. Honestly, I wouldn't really send anyone into Ukraine. I would just send them more material support if we have it to spare, and generally focus on the Russians inside the Baltics and also around the St. Petersburg area. Because if we start to counterattack and stabilize the front there, the situation in Ukraine will improve regardless of whether we send direct forces into Ukraine or not. Because the Russians will have to start diverting manpower from the Ukrainian front and further north towards St. Petersburg, Narva, and the Suwalki Gap to try and stop the NATO steamroller from squashing them further north. So as a result of that, the Ukrainians would have a much better time advancing on their own front entirely on their own. Because we have to remember, folks, that while Ukraine is an allied state and we're 100% in support of them and want them to win the conflict, in that hypothetical scenario, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are getting steamrolled in real time. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go, damn, let's just ignore all of them and let them get steamrolled, and let's send our guys into Ukraine to go fight there. It's like, why do that? NATO is for the protection of NATO allies, and while Ukraine's very close to being one, they're not one. We owe our first defensive actions and our blood, sweat, and tears to the Baltic states and our eastern flank before we go to Ukraine. Ukraine's something that we can deal with later, and the Ukrainians have it well in hand at this point right now from a wartime position. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But I would also agree with you. I would attack them in the Baltics, and I would also attack them around the Suwalki Gap and force them to remove troops into that area for all of those reasons. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, it's now time for us to finally move on out of Europe and on into the Middle East. Oh man, I always get a laugh these days, folks, out of the Middle East, because we don't have a lot of military action that's happening down here, but at this point, just in diplomatic actions alone, it is quite unequivocally a circus and a half. It is the Ringling Brothers Circus at this point. So if y'all are sad that the Ringling Brothers Circus went away, don't fret, folks. It's back. It's just in the Middle East, and it's not a circus anymore. It's just real life. So moving us on into the Middle East, we have been able to hear that the Iranians are apparently planning on shifting strategy at this point with the United States of America, and they're currently planning on trying to conduct some economic warfare against the United States of America. According to what we've been able to hear today, for a senior Iranian official, Iran is systematically preparing to damage the current presidency in the United States through economic warfare, aimed at making him lose the November midterms. The plan includes strikes on Gulf oil terminals to surge global energy prices by destroying the remaining Hormuz bypasses, which would be the port of Yanbu in Saudi Arabia, and the port of Fujairah within the UAE, which totals about 5.5 million barrels a day, and targeting the support network behind the US-backed Shadow Fleet in the Strait to fully shut down to zero from the current 5 million barrels a day that some people are claiming, although I'm not entirely sure if that's true. The officials say the direct operational chain is crude to pump prices to CPI to voter mood and the economy being voters' top issue with under 3 months to go until the midterms, meaning they're going to try and launch this during now and the next 3 months leading up to the midterms. Majid Shakiri, the advisor to Iran's Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf, adds, Iran must raise the tension level focused on oil before the midterms, and fortunately America handed over the necessary pretext. Obviously, Iran will not wait for America's economic attack in a preemptive defense. So the Iranians are starting to make it fairly clear that they're going to be looking to try and ruin the United States economically, or at least drive us into a pretty tough spot to see that the president in his party doesn't really bode that well in the midterms. I don't think they know this, but the president isn't really a popular guy anymore in the United States as it is. So, that I don't even think they really need to try that to make that happen. But we also have been able to hear that the Iranian Foreign Ministry condemned the new U.S. economic sanctions that were imposed today, calling them economic terrorism and a crime against humanity, and vowed to use all means and capacities to defend national sovereignty. Basically, folks, this is just them crying bloody murder over the minimal sanctions. The sanctions that were applied today basically mean nothing, but they're crying bloody murder so that way they can create their diplomatic justification or pretext to start the major attacks that we were just reading and talking to you all about a moment ago in the last post, so that way they can start causing more economic tribulations here in the West that might lead to the current presidency losing a great amount of favor here in the United States, and thus affecting the midterm elections. In the meantime, the U.S. is apparently still watching the oil prices rise, as Brent crude and U.S. crude oil have risen 53% for Brent over the course of this year since the start, and U.S. crude oil has also risen 51% since the start of this year in prices. Generally looking like not a great situation, and we've also been able to hear that apparently the Treasury Secretary Bessent said, "We've got a spike in oil prices today that I don't really understand."
Oh, shit. Oh, man.
Best put by Colonel Jack the Ripper. What an asinine comment. Honestly,
Honestly, really. I mean, they don't really understand. I'm shocked that they don't really understand. I'm blown away.
man, I just don't understand why the price is rising. It's not like there's this whole country stopping a quarter of the world's oil from being sold every day. I wonder what leads to this.
You know what's even more funny than that? Is the fact they're acting like it's brand new, like they just became shocked, like they don't understand what's happening. It's like they haven't understood what's happening the whole time. He's acting like it just started today, the misunderstanding.
They're sitting there, oh, I don't know what's happening. Do you know what's happening? I don't know what's happening. It's like, wow, truly a mystery, folks. It's not like we've been talking about the Strait of Hormuz for almost 7 months at this point. I wonder what in the hell could be causing such a comeuppance in the oil markets as this. You know what? Let's go look at them, actually. Let's see here. Crude oil prices. Let me see if I can go get this. Oh, so yeah, it jumped up about $4 a barrel today. In a day, by the way. And also, let's see here. Let me go pull up Brent crude prices to see how that's done. Let's see here. Brent. Oh yeah, that also jumped about $4 today as well. Both of them are hovering about 90 at this point. So, I wonder what led to that. I wonder what. Also, what a stupid comment to make. It's like it's jumped higher on other prior days. It's like jumped up $10 in a day sometimes from time to time. It's like what's so shocking about a $4 increase anymore?
Can you imagine the hell that guy's probably getting behind closed doors? Oh my goodness. Like, I can only imagine the hell that's going on right now. It was supposed to be economic devastation. Are you stupid or crooked? Are you stupid or crooked? I can see that crap right now. This dude's probably getting chewed out.
It's going to be an economic D-Day, biggest thing ever. Meanwhile, folks, the Chinese actually added in that they don't believe that the U.S.'s economic warfare strategy on Iran will work. I wonder why they say that. I wonder if it's because they're actually trying to help the Iranians not be affected that badly. I wonder. It's kind of like how they help out the Russians a little bit to keep them kind of around. They throw them a bone every once in a while. I wonder if they're throwing the Iranians a bone. It's not like it was an alleged Chinese manpad that might have shot down that F-15EX over southern Iran, and it's not like they had a whole bunch of advanced Chinese radar and air defense systems, and it's not like the Chinese were shipping in thousands of missile components into Iran before the war, during the war, and after the war. That would be ridiculous to even make the notion that China likes Iran, because the president has a great relationship with China, and we all know that just calling dictators friends in this world makes them stop doing bad things. If only the people of old knew that, like, oh, Stalin is my friend, the gulags would have disappeared overnight. Magic, but beyond that, I gotta say, folks, I do not like the Chinese Communist Party, and the People's Republic of China is an enemy of the Republic. But I will say, however, that I generally would agree with their assessment that the economic warfare isn't really going to be working, because that's just a common sense sort of a statement. Kind of sad that an enemy of the Republic is saying that, but it is the reality of the fact. This whole economic warfare concept is never going to work. Has it worked against anybody yet? No, it's like it works in conjunction with fighting a war against them for the most part, which right now we have in Russia because Ukraine's fighting the war against Russia and they also have the sanctions inflicted against them, which is a double whammy, which is taking them on down and out and making them incredibly desperate. If you just throw sanctions on a country like Iran and you do nothing else to them, they will stabilize at a very impoverished level, but they will survive. And that's what we're doing right now. It's just not going to work. We also were able to hear as well today that a U.S. aircraft, an E-3 Sentry, actually squawked to 7,700 and I believe landed at the Prince Sultan Air Base after it squawked to 7,700. Most likely some sort of engine troubles or engine difficulties is what we're assuming from the situation today. And we also were able to hear that along the coastline of Yemen today near Al-Makalla, the UK MTO reported that a tanker broadcast a distress call on VHF 16 that they had been approached by an unauthorized vessel while traveling west in the Gulf of Aden. The UK MTO later received confirmation that the tanker was boarded by 6 armed persons who are now in control of the vessel and are redirecting it to Somalia.
Oh, it's the Somali pirates. They're back. They're back. Man, I thought this was the Houthis earlier today, but it's the Somali pirates. They're back. They're back to those old Captain Phillip ways again, apparently. Like, geez, man. Out of all the stuff happening, Somali pirates want to jump back out there and start taking some ships again.
Man, the Somali pirates, man, like a lot of people say, oh, they're like poor and broke ass Somalis, like they don't know what's going on. Honestly, they got to be pretty smart because the piracy stuff died off after like 2012. And it just happens, folks, that in the most unstable time in the modern Middle East, they go, Yar, it's time to hit the high seas and start pillaging vessels. It's like, how the hell did they know that? It's like, they had to be paying, like, I'll have to give the pirates credit, folks. The pirates have to apparently be a little bit smarter than we're giving them credit for, because they did know that the region is highly unstable, and they're kind of going to get under the radar for a little bit, and they immediately started going out there and just nabbing ships left and right in the Gulf of Aden. I mean, it is unbelievable. It is a literal massacre of ships going on down there in the Gulf of Aden. If they're not getting hit by the Houthis, the Somali pirates are taking them instead and bringing them to Somalia. But anyways, we've also been able to hear that within the world today, there was another interesting little development that happened. Ian Ellis, which I have a great respect for, put out a map today that is actually showing the carrier distributions globally right now, as of today, of where the carriers currently are in their status. So, here is the rundown. The USS George Washington is in CENTCOM. The USS George H.W. Bush is in CENTCOM. The USS Abraham Lincoln, surprisingly enough, is still in CENTCOM. The USS Tripoli has actually left the Middle East and has returned back to port in Yokosuka, Japan. We also understand that the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower is apparently at port in the United States at Norfolk Naval Yard. The USS Theodore Roosevelt is back at port at San Diego. The USS Carl Vinson is currently undergoing training, and 4 aircraft carriers are undergoing maintenance. The Ronald Reagan, the Ford, the Stennis, and also the Harry S. Truman. The Gerald R. Ford had actually just returned from its own rotation inside the Middle East, along with the Harry S. Truman. One carrier, though, that's a little bit interesting is the USS Nimitz, because while it's technically listed as an operational aircraft carrier, it's everything but an operational aircraft carrier. If y'all don't know, by law, we actually have to maintain a fleet of 11 aircraft carriers by congressional act. But the problem is that the USS John F. Kennedy is not ready to be put into the water yet and commissioned as an active aircraft carrier, and they were planning on decommissioning and retiring the Nimitz a couple of months back. I believe it was about 7 months back. And because of the congressional act that mandates that we have to have 11 aircraft carriers, the Nimitz is completely decrewed and deplaned. There's absolutely no aircraft on it, and there's basically no crew on it rather than a skeletal crew. But because of technical definition, they have to keep it on the register as an active aircraft carrier. Otherwise, the Navy will be in violation of a congressional act, and then that'll become an issue. So they have to keep the Nimitz around until the John F. Kennedy is put in the water, and then the Nimitz will finally get retired officially, although it pretty much is retired already. So we do not expect anything out of the Nimitz anytime soon. So we're really operating with 10 aircraft carriers right now, not 11. So that is currently our global force disposition of our carrier strike groups and their condition around the world, which I got to say, a big shout out to Ian Ellis. These infographics always look incredible. But moving us on out of that, it's now time for us to get on and into a little bit of news that doesn't come from Iran. It comes from Syria and Lebanon. This is kind of a different corner of the Middle East over here. This is Israel's playground, where they dropped
What about
2,000.
the news about that Tehran, the refinery?
Oh yeah, Oh yeah, good eye there. The Tehran refinery caught on fire today. There it is. Don't know why. They just do that, I guess. Oh man, it's probably let's see, the Mossad or the CIA, I would assume, you know? It could be anyone. But it looks like a lot of people are actually talking about that in the poll, which must be why Matthew brought that up. He was like, "Hey, what about that Tehran oil refinery fire?" And Matthew, what are people thinking about that fire, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so that's one of the biggest pieces of news out of Iran today is that major fire at the refinery right there, which is in the capital city of Tehran. So it's a significant one. It's not just like a side note. This is a pretty big deal that it caught on fire today. A very major fire right in the middle of the planet, looks like. So is this part of the U.S. plan to cripple Iran? That's the question. 33% said it could be Israel or some rebels, possibly, maybe. 32% said yes, it's a U.S. sabotage campaign. And 21% said no, this seems largely unrelated. And I think it's part of a U.S. sabotage campaign. I think it probably is, but it's probably not U.S. agents carrying it out. It's most likely, like Enforcer was just saying, it's most likely Mossad or some type of embedded Iranian agents that are already there in theater for the most part. It's probably not like some dudes in polos running around setting fires. It's probably not that. It's probably folks that would blend in for the most part. So I think it is a sabotage campaign. The fact that that thing caught on fire in such a big way right in the middle of the refinery, I would say that looks a little sus to me, to say the least. So I think that might be part of it. It could be a dual prong. It could be a hybrid warfare plan and an economic plan that the U.S. is trying to conduct on Iran, which would make more sense if they're doing that. But I'm not sure if it's going to work all the way. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's the Israelis. It's the Mossad. It's got to be. I mean, who in the world else would do that, folks? I mean, the CIA. Come on, are we kidding? The CIA is busy on the internet space these days. That's where they're at. The Mossad is definitely the one that did that, I would assume. Or it may be local rebels, maybe. But I would generally lean towards the Mossad because, like, the Iranians do kind of have a little bit of a point, folks, that if there is really a boogeyman working behind the scenes in Iran to just do acts of, mischief and mayhem, it's going to be the Mossad. I mean, that's kind of their specialty in Israel. But moving us on from that and into Syria, we were able to hear that at the Abu Abdullah airport today, it looks like the Turks have helped them to repair this airfield. Here is the before picture. And here is the before picture, I guess.
What the hell? Man, what are you doing, man? What are you trying to make me feel like I'm nuts or something? Like you said, here's the before picture. You flip to the next one. It's showing the same damn thing. It's like a cratered runway, bro.
I mean, I was expecting the next picture to be the after. Like, man, like I kind of like thought it was because I read open source.
I was studying that damn picture. I was studying the hell out of that thing, thinking, what the hell? Like, what the hell changed? Like, I was like, am I going nuts? I don't see anything that changed.
Man, I said, here's the before picture. And here is the before picture, man. Like, I was like, what the hell? But according to open source intel, just to read this really quickly, fresh satellite imagery shows the aftermath of the Israeli strikes on Syria's Abu al-Dahr airbase, with 4 impact points visible on runways recently renovated with Turkish assistance. So I was reading that as the Turks were actually renovating these airstrips and were actually covering up the craters, which is still how I'm kind of reading that. But these satellite pictures do not show any renovations here. So either I'm misunderstanding what was written, or the pictures aren't depicting what they're supposed to. I'm not really sure which it is. But still, we have that little bit of information coming out of Syria for whatever that may be. Look, fool me once, shame on you. You fool me twice. Look, you fool me once, you can't fool me again. So moving us on out of Syria and on down into southern Lebanon, the Israeli Defense Forces have been busy once again bombing anything that moves in southern Lebanon. As we all know, that is a pastime and a national sport of the state of Israel, and it looks like they're still at it. We were able to see that a significant explosion was conducted today in southern Lebanon in an unknown location, but we could tell that the explosion is significant due to the size of the explosion, which looks significant. We also were able to see that in the Al-Tahrir Heights, there were also significant air campaigns being conducted in airstrikes by the Israeli Air Force. There's a little blip of one. But we need to get to the biggin, right here. Ah, yes, those thermobaric nuclear weapons. Like, the Israelis drop these every day.
Oh! Oh! Oh, can you hold it down, Jack?
Man, I'm not gonna lie, man. The Israelis just dropping them bombs again. They just keep it going, folks. They never quit. If you give the Israeli a bomb and someone in the area to drop it on, they're gonna do it. But anyways, moving aside out of the Middle East, it's now time for us to move on over, folks, into East Asia, because it's time for us to make our way around the world and back towards Ukraine. In South Korea today, we have been able to hear that apparently the president's attempt to de-escalate the situation. Oh, hello. But the president's attempts to
That's what he does when he sees the Twinkie truck roll up. He said, "Oh, hello there."
Oh man, I'll take two, man. Oh man, but beyond that, yeah, just a little while ago, folks, 16 hours ago from this moment right now, North Korea actually fired 10 short-range ballistic missiles towards the eastern waters today of the East Sea, near to the nation of Japan, according to South Korean officials. Because of that, South Korea has convened an emergency security meeting after North Korea launched more than 10 short-range ballistic missiles towards the waters east of the Korean peninsula, and Seoul has ordered its military to maintain full readiness. Wow, it sounds like the president's really de-escalating things in the middle, in the middle of East Asia. I was about to say the Middle East. Forgot we're having dumpster fires globally at this point. Sounds like he's really de-escalating, folks. He went and said that Kim Jong-un is a great friend of his, and they've been treated poorly, and he stopped military exercise because the South Koreans wouldn't help him with the war in Iran, so North Korea responded by firing more ballistic missiles in a day than they ever have yet.
I think my theory is true. I think geopolitics and global foreign policy, it works like a prison. Like if you go to prison, you don't go in there like, "Hey guys, what's up?" It's like they're be like, "Oh, he's a punk. We're going to get him." But you walk in there and you got to prove yourself a little bit. You can't just walk up in there and expect to have respect on the block. It's not going to work. They're going to try to run your pockets, as they call it. So I don't think going to prison cell block B, like in North Korea, and being like, "Hey Kim, we'd like to meet you." It's like I don't think that's going to cut it. I don't think they're going to respect that, and I don't think they did.
Oh, gee willikers, mister. I can't wait to meet you again as you run your gulags and concentration camps across your country. Boy, that's a country we really respect here in America. And then meanwhile, they went, "Screw you, American," and fired another 10 ballistics into the EC. It's like, man, you just can't do the stuff that the president does. Someone's about to come in here and say we don't get it. You don't get it. How the hell can you look at this and say that this makes sense? Goodness. There's someone, folks, it's baffling to me. This is why I even mention it. It's baffling to me. We can watch the president do something that was clearly stupid. We say it's stupid. People shit on us for that. And then the North Koreans do something stupid in response, which clearly shows we were right. And then someone's going to come in here and say we just don't get it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Did it just happen?
Did what happen?
Oh, it didn't happen yet. I was waiting to see.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, it's just it's a tough little place out there, tough place, a very brutal world with geopolitics. It's very cutthroat. They don't like to be friendly. They don't like to be all hunky dory and stuff like that. It's not a very nice place.
Yeah, North Korea does what they want to do. That's why I say we ought to not treat them well. Because they're not a nice country. They're not nice people. But moving us on out of South Korea, it's now time for us to move on over into Central America. Due to the super El Nino that's going on, the Panama Canal is still dealing with dropping water levels, and the Panama Canal is now limiting cargo capacity twice in the coming weeks to lighten ships, citing low water levels due to the El Nino drought within the area. And with less freight moving per vessel, carriers are hiking surcharges to $1,000 per container of cargo. Quite a large amount. Currently, the Panama Canal over the past few years, generally throughout the course of this decade since about 2022, has actually had to cut in sometimes half or even greater the amount of passages through the area of the Panama Canal due to, and I don't mean to bring this up, folks, as a point of discussion, but this is just quite literally the reason. Due to climate change within the region and ongoing droughts within Central America, Lake Gatun and Lake Alajuela, which the Panama Canal rely on for their water source, have been drying up year over year as the normal annual rainfalls have largely never arrived in the area over the past 20 to 15 years. Because of this, the Panama Canal is finally having to make the decision, due to the water levels becoming so low, the canal may cease operations within the next several decades, to start having passages passages so they can try and conserve the limited water resources that they have within Panama, within the two lakes that feed into the canal, to be able to try and make the canal still operational to some degree, although it has significantly reduced capacity. And we're now hearing because of the Super El Nino, which is, I believe, the largest one ever on recorded weather records, we're now seeing that the drought is even worsening farther, and they're now having to cut down even more passages through the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is very important for American trade, as a large amount of American vessels actually use it to transit around the United States of America. And we also use the Panama Canal to see that trans-Pacific crossings from China and other major industrial producers to the United States of America are conducted as efficiently as possible, and instead of having to travel all the way around the Americas to get to the East Coast, they're able to skirt right through the Panama Canal. So this may start to lead to increases in prices of consumer goods due to the increased shipping costs and shipping rates that are being seen of either having to go all the way around the Americas to make it to the East Coast, or because the passages through the Panama Canal are limited and a good bit more expensive. So moving us on out of that bit of news within the Panama Canal, which is a little bit of a concerning development, to say the least, it's now time for us to finally move on back and into the war in Ukraine. Currently, the armed forces of Ukraine are conducting another major drone attack against the Russian Federation, which we can see the drone attack vectors here and also on another infographic as well, right here, actually showing the number of drones that the Russians are seeing. And boy, Matthew, that looks like a strong easterly wind going on into the Volga River region. I hope nothing bad happens there after we go off of air.
Oh, well, blow me down. It looks like the big bad wolf's he's at the brick house and he wants in.
Man, he's getting in. Man, like he's getting in with that number. Like that's quite a lot of them.
Hello there. I'm Sally. You remember that part?
Oh, you can. Oh, dude,
Yeah, I know. They had to remove that part out of the cartoon.
Man, what did he turn into after they removed that? He was like,
I'm the insurance salesman.
oh yeah, man, he went from selling brushes to being an insurance man. But man, like what a flip, like, what a change. But aside from that drone attack within that area, we've also been able to hear that within the territory of the state of Ukraine last night, things were not great. The city of Kyiv was hit quite heavily once again last night, and we were able to get some video and picture evidence of that out of the Kyiv city area from one citizen who had a Russian drone or a missile land basically right next to him. Here's the clip.
Well, uh-oh. That sounded like pain.
That did. We also were able to see another clip here showing more ballistic missiles impacting the city. Notice that most of the munitions that are actually hitting the city of Kyiv are actually ballistic missiles. And it's once again because they're running extremely low. They basically have no Patriot interceptors to work with anymore. And so almost every single Russian ballistic missile that's fired into Ukraine is basically a guaranteed hit at this point on whatever target it's going for. We have also been able to hear that apparently earlier this year, Zelensky was offered by his general staff with a plan to attack Moscow airports with thousands of drones to be able to shut down civilian traffic to the city and to try and force the Russian elites to put more pressure on Putin to end the conflict. Zelensky refused the idea because he said it was a concern that they could start to attack civilian aircraft, or that commanders and operators may go out of their way to attack civilian aircraft, which would be a very bad optic for the state of Ukraine, as that would largely be something akin to a war crime. So we do understand that this was apparently offered by the Ukrainian general staff, but Zelensky refused it on the grounds of it largely being unnecessary to win the conflict, and also the fact that it could start to easily get into the territory of conducting war crimes. So I gotta say, Zelensky out there once again showing that he has a bit of a moral spine. Something that some people these days who are kind of in that little Fedorov camp wouldn't tell you about. It's like Zelensky, yeah, it's like people have complaints against him. We've had a few over the years, but it's like, at least he's not, Putin. It's like he could be that. He's certainly not that. That's for sure. Moving us on out of that bit of news, though, we also were able to hear further on down and in the area of Crimea that the Simferopol city area apparently came under a significant attack, and according to eyewitness reports, there were 15 explosions in the last 20 minutes about 6 hours ago inside of Simferopol. We're not really sure what was getting hit within that area, but it does certainly appear that there was a major attack on Simferopol overnight. Additionally, the Taman-Nefgast oil terminal at Taman has also been hit, and firm satellite confirmed that there is another fire on the facility. This is also showing us a little bit of the damage that was conducted by the last attack, and the fires appear to be in a similar area, showing that the Ukrainians are conducting second attack on the same location of the Taman Neftgas facility here at the city of Taman. Outside of this news, we also were able to hear that a major 500 megawatt or kilovolt substation within the Taman region near Krasnodar Krai was also hit as well. The station was reportedly heavily damaged, overloading and temporarily knocking out most of Crimea's power grid. So the only substation that basically provides power to the whole of Crimea got knocked out, and it created another major blackout across the whole of Crimea again. So the Russians are once again taking fat L's every single day of the week. We also were able to hear that there was heavy air defense activity near to Novorossiysk, but we have absolutely gotten no video or picture evidence of the attack in the area or the air defense fire. So outside of the written report that there was an attack on Novorossiysk, we don't really have a lot to report or analyze on the situation at the moment to know what the Ukrainians were trying to conduct an attack on, what they were hitting, what drones were shot down, if any, what the air defense looked like, or any of that. We just have to report that there was air defense fire, and that's it. So moving us on out of the Novorossiysk port area and all of these attacks inside of southern Ukraine, we also were able to see a clip from central Ukraine showing that the Ukrainians successfully took down a jet-powered Shahed or Garan drone with a Sting interceptor drone. Pretty cool to know that they got the speed to do that, actually.
Yeah, those things must be flying. Who knows how fast they're going? Really, just to be able to catch up and like overtake a jet drone. That's some serious speed.
Man, the Russians tried to create the jet-powered drone, and then the Ukrainians said, "Let us show you the power of the propeller." Man, bro, and then they showed them. But moving us on from that and inside, outside of central Ukraine, we've also been able to see in our location unknowns quite an interesting clip. The tiniest train I have ever seen, it's a fuel train apparently, that was trying to make it through Ukraine somewhere, we don't know where. It was targeted and destroyed by a Ukrainian attack. Look at that. This is quite literally, folks, like a small switching layout train that you would see on like a tiny HO scale layout in someone's house. It has a locomotive, 2 gondola cars, and 2 fuel cars. That's the whole train. That is extremely uneconomical to run this train. Trains are quite expensive, folks, to run. They consume diesel like there is no tomorrow. So to run one of these things, you gotta actually attach some stuff to them to make it make sense in terms of the tonnage, I guess you could say per gallon of diesel that you're burning to move it. And this does not look economical at all. I mean, if the Russians are running trains like this, they're probably going broke just from the amount of diesel this thing is burning to move this little cargo. But the Ukrainians didn't really care about that. They just blew up the fuel tanks. Oh,
Just
bleed.
2 janky fuel tanks in the back, just carrying whatever little bit that they have. Look at all that junk pouring down the side of it. Look like oil.
Man, bro, they loaded the diesel in an oil tank, bro, and it's like sloshing in there with the oil all over the walls. Oh man, it's contaminated.
Nothing like fuel that lubricates all at the same time.
Oh, and then they hit a truck on the base of this locomotive right there. You can see that right there. So it looks like quite the nice hit right there. I don't really know what kind of effect that's going to have on the Russian armed forces or the rear line areas because they are very low on fuel. So that fuel could have been everything they were planning on getting in the whole area. But we'll have to wait and see if it does have any direct effects that we can measure in the occupied territories. We also were able to get the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And holy moly, 3 Bobcats.
Oh, that is nice. 3 for me, they say. 3 for me. But tell us more.
And according to Ms. Deese, keeper of the records, Russian losses to August 20th, 2026, day 1,639, increased personnel and tank losses, 7 MLRSs tied as the 5th highest daily loss, 10 ground robotic complexes tied as the 10th highest, and 500 auto and fuel tanks ranks as 15th. And over the course of the past 24 hours, we were able to see that 1,480 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, quite a large number, along with 7 main battle tanks, 3 APCs, 56 artillery pieces, 7 MLRSs, 1,672 drones, 10 ground robotic complexes, 500 supply trucks, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, quite a great and wonderful thing to see. We love to see it. It's a good thing to see. Moving us on from that and on down into the front lines in the Donbass, we also were able to see that near to the Lehman direction, the Ukrainian 63rd Brigade was making sure to hit some more Russian forces, putting those numbers in on that spreadsheet. They got a buhanka, bleed. Now in the African savannah, I'm guessing that's what that looks like right there. Here in the wilds of the African safari comes the Ukrainian condor. Squaw! The Ukrainian condor is a small creature that is majestic in flight, but deadly on the attack. Here we can see a couple of vulnerable Russians who have foolishly wandered into the open of the savannah outside of the cover of the trees, and they are about to become the meal of this Ukrainian condor creature. Squall! Oubliette!
Oh dear. Oh no, they left the van doors open.
Man, they let a draft in.
They let the robbers in. It looks like. Look at this. Hmm.
I mean, if you leave the door open at your little dacha in Russia, man, you might literally let the draft in. Hello, this is the conscription officer. No!
Yeah, really, honestly. You got to go and sign up for the Russian service and serve the country. But don't they only last 20 minutes on the front line, Igor? It's true, but you still got to go.
It is okay, comrade. Your family will get chocolate cake and water park tickets in your name. Like, it's like, oh, well, that makes it all worthwhile.
Man, the son may be lost in the battlefield in the first 20 minutes, but you know, mama back home getting to enjoy the slip and slide out there at the water park. It's all made up for. It's all good and even now.
oh man, well that one's a little too spicy.
Oh dear.
Man, you turn into Polly from the damn Sopranos right there. You went, oh, bro, like it's like it's okay, T. It's okay. Oh man, but we also get to see the Ukrainian National Police popping some drones in Konstantinivka. I don't know what kind of music. Man, what the hell do they have there? They're playing the Charleston from the 1930s. I went body on the way to Cincinnati, body in for my girl. It's like, what the hell was that?
It was that old swing music, I think, or something like that. Turn
What
that off.
the
Turn that
hell?
off, man.
Bro,
That's gonna be a copyright.
Man, I think shit, man. That's probably free use at this point. You know, like whatever they call it, because it's like hell. That's got to be like 100 years old at this point, whatever that is. But anyways, moving aside from that, the National Police about to pop them caps. Pop. Oh my God, he one-shotted.
It's like that Fallout. It's like a Fallout scene right here with the old timey music.
Man, real. Man, he's got his little Pip-Boy on. He's listening to that
Sing
classic
the
radio.
song. Sing the song.
Oh, which one? Which Fallout song?
That one where it's like the one that sounds like the one that they're playing.
I don't want to set the world on fire.
Or that one? Like, is that one? Oh, thank you. I'll be here all week. Of course.
Encore.
Oh no. Like, I think that's enough.
Yeah, I'm just playing.
Man, it's like, nah, I don't even think I could take that again, man. Like, I'm all right. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on, and unfortunately into the Kramatorsk city area, as we were able to see the Russians did hit a supermarket within the Kramatorsk area. We do not know of the casualty assessment at this point from the Kramatorsk supermarket attack. And that's the end of the clip. Moving us on from that unfortunate video, we also were able to see that in the Dobropilia direction, the Ukrainians are making the Russians pay tenfold. This is a Russian POV of getting hit by an FPV drone. You see the ATV in front of them. Oh, and they're gone. Man. They just said, anyways, brrr, it just kept going. It's like, man, I would have turned around and left, like, me personally.
So you might be wondering, how did I end up here? And then you cut to that scene right there.
Man, you're probably wondering, why am I in 6 chunks? Well, it's a great question. I was conscripted by the Russian Federation, and I believed that the war was a good one. So I went to Ukraine, and I never came back. Really keeping my heart where the war is, bleed. Moving on down and into the M14, we also were able to see the carnage along the highway here. Oh, wow, they got some shit playing right there. Sound like a computer glitch. But we can see a load of vehicles destroyed all along the highway. What a terrible fate.
What the hell's that pink thing up there on the dashboard?
La boop. I don't know, man. Like,
really, it's like what, comfort thing or something.
I don't think that thing's for comfort, man. But anyways, moving us on from that and on down to the area of Melitopol, we also get to see some more supply trucks getting cooked by the Ukrainians.
Somebody said it's a Dino. I think it could have been.
Maybe so. Это хорошо, блядь. I don't know a lot about dinos or dinos, блядь, but I do know about these drones hitting these trucks, and they are hitting them quite hard. Damn. Damn. Well, moving us on from that clip and on into our next one, we also were able to see that unfortunately, at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant today, another concerning report came out from the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA has been informed that a 330 kilovolt Ferrosplanova 1 power line at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the plant's only remaining offsite power line, was disconnected at 4400 local time today, resulting in a new loss of offsite power. The location of the damage to the line was preliminarily assessed to be in the northern bank of the Dnipro River. So on the Ukrainian side, so the Russians blew it up. An attempt to reconnect the line manually was unsuccessful, and due to ongoing military activity, technicians are currently unable to determine the cause of the outage. Emergency diesel generators automatically started up to power the plant's vital safety systems, and the IAEA team at the plant continues to assess the situation. Each loss of offsite power underscores the extreme fragility, nuclear safety, and security situation at the CNPP, said Director General Rafael Grossi, repeating his call for maximum restraint and protection of the plant's external power supply. So once again, the Russians have completely severed the connection to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and we're hoping that the emergency generators are able to operate for almost an indefinite period at this point until the high voltage power lines can be reconnected again. So moving us on out of that news and that cliffhanger out of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it's now time for us folks to move on up into Kyiv and cover the speech from the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, over the course of this day of 1639 of the war. And so without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Bitch!
Шановні українці, українки, значну частину дня сьогодні у Києві і в області, в Борисполі, Броварах тривали роботи після російського удару. Комбінований був удар, багато балістики, крилатих ракет, були дрони. На жаль, з балістикою найскладніше зараз. Якщо відсоток збиття крилатих ракет в цьому ударі близько 90%, то з балістикою ситуація значно гірша. Потрібні ракети для патріотів – це те, що можуть забезпечити тільки наші партнери. На всіх рівнях ми доводимо до них і нашу потребу, і те, що ми знаємо, що цю нашу потребу партнери можуть заповнити. Ми говоримо не про подарунки, це про готовність України купувати зброю. Важливо, щоб були рішення, відповідні політичні рішення партнерів і передусім в Сполучених Штатах. Я вдячний усім, хто реально допомагає Україні оборонятись та рятувати життя людей. Тільки цим російським ударом були убиті 16 людей. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Ще майже 50 людей були поранені, пошкоджено більше 200 об'єктів. Тільки будинків 86, дитяча лікарня, соціальна інфраструктура, торгівельні об'єкти. Росія продовжує цю свою війну проти людей і життя, і зупинити її реально тільки силою, тільки спільною роботою. І ніхто не має залишатися наодинці проти такого ворога. Ми обов'язково відповімо на цей російський удар. Так само, як і на інший російський удар. Відповімо цілком справедливо і далекобійно. Українська далекобійність буде отримувати ще більше ресурсу. Сьогодні також я підписав укази про нові санкції. Кілька пакетів проти російського воєнного комплексу, проти тих осіб, які самі стали так чи інакше частиною російського способу життя та зберігають зв'язки з цією державою попри навіть таку війну. Це і колаборанти на тимчасово окупованих територіях України, і колишні діячі з України, які зараз десь там в Європі, але документами, зв'язками і душею вони в Росії. Ми будемо продовжувати нашу санкційну роботу та об'єднувати наші санкції в українській юрисдикції з санкціями партнерів. І ще одне. Ми готуємо рішення в дипломатичній команді, потрібні нові підходи на частині напрямків, і, зокрема, в Америці. Після відповідних консультацій будуть призначені. Україні потрібні результати. Я дякую всім, хто працює на нашу державу. Я дякую всім, хто захищає Україну, хто захищає українців. Слава Україні!
And Hiram
Hiram
Slava.
Slava. I must admit, I'm jealous of Zelensky flexing the patch wall. Dude's got literally every patch perfectly like aligned with each other. Like, I can't even express like how satisfying and how appealing that is to have all those patches lined up so perfectly like that to me. Like, I look at that, I'm just like, that is perfection, like absolute perfection the way he has those patches lined up.
He's got a patch for literally every single unit. It's really cool, actually. But with that, Haram Slava. And that is the end of the speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1,639 of the war. And it's time for us, folks, to move on to the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And I got to say that it is an absolute honor and a privilege to know that we've been able to run this channel once again for each and everyone once again tonight. I hope that it's been quite a good show and that y'all have enjoyed the news coverage, the analysis, and also some of the jokes that we've thrown out here and there. And so, without further ado, folks, it's time to get into chit-chatting with every single one of y'all. Chit-chatting, not chit-chatting. Man, chit-chatting, new word, new phrase. Just came up with it. Like,
Brand new word, old-fashioned term, chick-chacking. That's what they call it. He said, "You gotta talk them up, sir. Talk them up, sir." He said, "Sir, they just can't help it, sir. They have to listen, sir. It's like, look at this magazine. Look, it has my face on it. Look at this magazine. Are you stupid or you crooked? Are you stupid or you crooked?"
But on that note, it's time for us to get a chit-chatting, folks. It's Matthew. What do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night. It's time to get our super chats, our live chats, and our Morse code decoders. But jumping right into our super chats, first of all, our first one's going to go to none other than Marion Deemer, who puts in a $50 support, a generous 50. And thank you very much, Marion, for that massive support once again, and we do appreciate that sincerely. Marion said, "No comment. I don't want to get thrown off the feed because I think the administration does not give a dipshit about the pain they're causing us and our partners."
Now they really don't. They've made that exceptionally clear. They don't really care about the economic impact here in the United States, the impact on the service members, our allies, anybody. It's all about them. They've made that exceptionally clear in literal statements they've made publicly to the press, recorded audio. It's like there's no fibbing with that. I mean, with the economic damage, they got to be thankful that the gas is higher with the Middle East. The carriers should have been there longer. The troops should be there even longer. With the situation with our allies, all of our allies are stupid as shit. And also creating problems with them. That's pretty much the whole situation as it is. Very annoying stuff. Wish it was different.
The strategy is attack, 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 deny everything, admit nothing.
Pretty much. I mean, honestly.
That's legit the strategy. He learned it from a fella that's pretty notorious.
I mean, honestly, man, it's like, hell, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what the strategy is, and it's not working well at all. It looks dumb as hell. Folks, I wish one day we can have a government, an actual government that's elected. I don't care what party it comes from, but one that actually has sensible people in it that are not running clown shows. Because we went from the clown show of the last administration, which honestly, folks, I thought that was about as low as it could get. We went from that to this, which makes the last clown show look even light, like compared to what's going on right now. I wish that we could just have an administration that would come in. Hell, honestly, folks, I would just go for Bush at this point again. I mean, that wasn't even the greatest foreign policy we ever seen, but at least it had some sort of larger plan to it or an idea of what was going to be done rather than this. I mean, this literally they wake up and come up with a new idea every day. They don't even have a running trend of what they're doing. I mean, honestly, folks, it is quite annoying to deal with, but I do thank you greatly for the support and help with this channel to keep it running, Marion Deemer, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, we wouldn't be able to keep it running, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing on air. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $50 support from Ted Marshall, and thank you very much, Ted, for that 50, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, "Giving you fellows some love so you don't have to go back to law school." Those were some stressful times for y'all back in the day. Thank you, Ted, by the way, for that support. Honestly, like, if I was not doing YouTube while doing law school, it would have probably been much, much different, to be perfectly honest. I think the problem was trying to combine basically like a full-time job, which is exactly what this is here, and then also doing a full-time law school. That was a recipe for disaster. Like, I don't know really anybody that can do that. And in fact, I don't think you're supposed to work during the first year either. So, I mean, that's probably a good reason for not working there in the first years because it turns into an absolute nightmare. Law school is stressful enough on its own. But you add some full time job to it, you're just begging for it at that point. But but thank you for that support. And Forster, what say you?
Yeah, law school was hell. It was so hellish, and I got so little sleep. I think during the whole time I was in law school for that first year that we were in it, I was maybe getting 4 hours of sleep or less a night. Everything involved. I actually don't even really remember anything of law school. I remember that I did it, and I remember everything leading up to it and everything after it, but I actually don't remember squat of the time that I was in law school. I think I was quite literally so exhausted. All of it's but a faded memory. I think I remember like one or two people, and at that, I hardly remember them from law school. And one of the few moments that I actually remember is the moment that I was sitting in that library at that law school, folded up my computer, put it in my backpack, and was walking out. And someone said, "Oh, hey, are you leaving for the day?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm leaving for the day." They're like, "Oh, okay, I'll see you tomorrow." I was like, "Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow." Never went back. Like, never went back. Never
That's
saw
my
them tomorrow.
story.
Your story.
Yeah, that's the story I was telling about when we were leaving, man. You're like shoehorning your way into my story.
Man, that's literally my story, man. I was in the library on the first
No,
floor.
that's my story.
That's my story, boy. Like, I think you're forgetting your own story. I mean,
Boy,
yeah, boy. What's your story, boy?
man, my story was I remember just walking about the place and literally identical to what you just said right now. It was literally the same thing.
Well, man, shit, man. I remember lasting like a day or two longer than you did because I was to be honest, folks, I was afraid of leaving law school. Not because I didn't know what I was going to be doing. It was other reasons. But I stayed for another 2 days longer, and I remember on that second day after Matthew left, I think basically we did the same thing, but I just did it 2 days later. I was sitting in the library and I was sitting there at the computer looking in the notes. I was like, I just can't do it anymore. I closed up the computer, put it in my book bag, slung it over my back, got out, and they were like, "Oh, hey, you leaving for the day?" I was like, "Yeah." They were like, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow." I was like, "Got you," and never went back. Got to my car and I left, and that was it. And so, I mean, honestly, law school, I didn't really like it, and if I wasn't doing this, I think I still wouldn't have liked it. I think I probably would have ended up hating it nonetheless. But a
Yeah.
huge thing. Hmm?
Also, John Garner said, Enforcer Matthew had graduated from law school and gone all the way through it. Who would you have wanted to work for and why? I was actually planning on working for myself. Actually, I was going to go into private practice, but it's just, like I could have, like, here's the catch. I was doing well in law school. Like, I had good grades, was near the top of the class and stuff like that. Like, I was doing fine in there, but I wasn't really, like, super satisfied with it to a large degree. So it's like, I could have gone through it. I could have, like, obviously gotten out and done pretty decent, probably. But it's like, is it all about the money, or do you want to do something that you really want to do? Me personally, I'm of the mindset I would rather do something I want to do than make a killing, basically. So I would rather just do what I would like, that I actually enjoy. If that means making a lot less, then that's just the way it is. I look at it that way.
Yeah, that's how I generally look at it as well. I kind of honestly, folks, knew I didn't want to do it anyways. Before I even went to law school, I was like, that's not really my thing. But I was kind of told that I was either going to have to go or there was going to be consequences. So I ended up taking on tremendous amounts of debt, just to appease folks that I shouldn't have. So, anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And a big thanks to you for your support and help with this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have here our next one, which goes to Greg Baker, who puts in a 30. And thank you very much, Greg, for that $30 support. And Greg said, back to the diesel shortage. The Russians probably don't have grain to feed animals for consumption or seed to plane next year. And what are your thoughts?
I would assume that that's probably true. We already know that the grain harvest is failing in Russia, and there's just not enough grain to go around. So I would assume that both of those are most likely true at this point. So a huge thanks to you for support and help with this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, I saw another question. I saw Tac say, if you guys could go back to school for anything, money and time doesn't matter, what would it be for? I'd go to college for being a mechanic, just for fixing my car. And thanks, guys. Me personally, if I could go back to school, I would probably go and become a psychologist, honestly. I know that seems really left field, like that people are like, a psychologist, but I've always had like a strong interest in psychology and that whole thing. I don't think you have to go to medical school to be a psychologist. I think to be a psychiatrist, you have to go to medical school, but for psychology, you simply have to go through normal like coursework. I think you have to go through like a PhD program or something like that to do that whole thing. I wouldn't mind that. Like, I kind of like that whole field and stuff like that. for the most part. I'm fascinated by it. So that's probably what I would do, but that's a pretty long, drawn out process to do that. I think that's years.
If I could do anything, it'd probably be related to trying to improve the channel. I'd probably go to school to learn how to do Blender and also video editors as well, and the video editing software, and learn how to do everything with it efficiently. Because if we could learn how to do that, that's really one of the main reasons why, folks, we don't make long form documentaries, is because we just don't really have that kind of knowledge inherently within us, and we have to try and learn it from the ground up, which is a lot to do with also balancing the normal workload of this channel on the daily. But if we could learn how to do that, or one of us could learn how to do that, then we could easily start pumping out good quality documentaries like you'll see from other channels, and also make it to where it's reasonable. Because we've tried looking into that stuff, folks, in the past, and it never makes any sense, because it actually costs more money to make the videos than the videos would ever make, no matter how much we tried to monetize them. So that's why we were never able to really do them. I would still love to do videos like that, though. I still watch videos like that on YouTube all the time, and I'm always looking at them. I'm like, dang, I really wish we could try and get into those sorts of videos. And also, I saw someone say you can try and teach yourself. It just takes way too much time, though. Like, it's like if we had unlimited time and money wasn't a factor, I would go learn it, but we just don't have enough time. I mean, this is a 60-hour a week job on my own end, and on Matthew's end, it's very close to that, I think, as well. So it's like, hell, it's basically all consuming to do just this with live streams and videos. So it's really hard to find any time to do anything outside of that, rather than basic chores to keep the world turning, when we're not on air, and to also just, try and stay alive and stay sane, and get a little bit of free time here and there as well. So with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from 2C2C856, and thank you as well for that $20 support. They said Russia is one of those kids that sneaks food in the middle of the night, gets caught by their mom, and says I didn't do it, while dad is grabbing the belt to whoop them.
I guess. I suppose.
And roll straight out of bed, grab the belt, and get to smacking.
Man, that's like Michael Jackson's dad. Gotta learn them steps. But Dad, I want to go play with the kids, man. Like whip that belt out. Man, right? He said, "You're gonna."
No, it's not very funny, actually, if you think about it. I mean, it's really. I can tell you, it definitely sucks. I can tell you, it sucks. Yeah. So I'm laughing, but I'm kind of like not laughing at the same time.
Well, I mean, if that Drewski guy can make a whole skit on it, I think we can get a joke or two on it. But but beyond that, though, I do have to say, I suppose that it is the case. I mean, maybe I don't really think I'm getting the gist of it, but I suppose so. I suppose so. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
And our next one goes to Leesburg Paranormal, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Leesburg, as well, for that $20 support. He said, if NATO gets into it with Russia, will we help? Or will we pull that you won't help us with Iran, so we won't help with Russia tactic?
They will probably try and pull the "you didn't help us with Iran, so there's consequences" sort of a tactic if it's up to this president. At this point, assume with the president, assume the worst, because the president has no common sense or reasoning to work off of, and doesn't think of the larger picture for the country. He thinks entirely of himself. That's not even being political. If you don't like that, folks, you're so far down the rabbit hole of drinking Kool-Aid, I can't help you. And there's no point in even complaining in the live chat, because if you look at the guy, I mean, like when the gas prices go up, he says it's a good thing that the prices are up. The American people ought to be grateful. He came in and promised that he was going to cut the gas prices in half and the energy prices in half. None of it's been halved. It's gotten more expensive. Now we're supposed to be thankful for it and thank him for getting screwed hand over fist. The soldier's supposed to thank him for being on a long-ass deployment with absolutely no shore leave, in abjectly horrible conditions on the carrier with basically no food. You're supposed to thank him and be there longer. All of our allies keep getting screwed. I mean, there's no way to look at the foreign policy side of things, or just the economic side of things and go, oh yeah, this guy's actually pretty good. No way at all. Like if you're trying to justify it at this point, you can. I mean, like they'll be like trying to justify the last administration's stupid screw ups in foreign policy. Go, well, I mean, they were only given 4 years. It's like, yeah, they were given 4 years and they failed all 4 years. So that is what it is. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you for your support and help with this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from Bradley Barrows, and thank you, Bradley, as well for the 20. He said that the South Korean president wants to reassert independent control to direct its military and be more self-reliant. And if they are able to build up their military more, do you think they could opt out of the wartime OPCON?
I'm pretty sure, Bradley, that they're in independent control of their armed forces anyways. Because I don't really know of any countries that subordinate their armed forces to ours. So let me pull that up there really quickly and check. Is South Korea's military independent from the United States? Let me go see. And the answer. So the only time that the United States would hold control over South Korean armed forces is in a state of war, which is a unified command structure. So in the current sense as it stands right now, they're a completely independent force. Um, so they're largely self-reliant as it stands right now. And as far as a unified command structure goes, and the advent of a war, it usually is standard for the United States to be the allied commander of any front in any war in our allied sphere around the world. So it's kind of similar to NATO saying, "Oh, well, if we're going to become independent from the United States and break away from NATO." It's like, well, they're independent right now. It's just that if we went to war as NATO, the U.S. is going to be the supreme allied commander of all NATO armed forces and the decisions made at the top. So I would say generally, let's see. They've been building up their military significantly, and I don't really think the situation is going to be changing all too much in this sort of an instance. And also, if the North Koreans go to war with South Korea, they probably want the United States to be around. And the United States said, "We're not helping you out," then they're not even beholden to the U.S. being the supreme commander of all forces on the Korean Peninsula because they're not even involved at that point. But I do thank you greatly for the support, Bradley, and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from Fredster, and thank you, Fredster, as well for the 20. He said the purpose of these provocations is to excite the anti-war groups and cause division in NATO countries. I would have to disagree, Fredster. I think what Russia's trying to do with these provocations is scare the hell out of the NATO countries that maybe a war is actually on the horizon, hoping that maybe that'll make their governments rethink support of Ukraine. That's what they're trying to do. And I think they're going to take it to the extreme and actually launch an attack to sort of pull that off and try to finish the job with that. That's what I think. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, um, generally, I would agree with Matthew. They're trying to get NATO to back off and give concessions to the Russians is what they're trying to do, and they're trying to see if they can do that without having to conduct a full blown attack. I would generally agree with Matthew on that one. I don't think they're trying to make the anti-war groups become more vocal. It's really the anti-war groups don't really have that much pull in any country, for the most part. And also on top of that, you're not really going to be furthering their cause by attacking a country, which kind of goes against the whole premise of being against war. They're kind of bringing the war to them, at least from how I would see it. But a big thanks to your support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and we wouldn't be able to make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have here a 20 from John Garner, and thank you as well, John, for the 20. He said, hello, Enforcer, and you too, Matt, but mostly the chat.
And hello there, John Gunner, and a big hello to the chat. There's a load of people in the chat right now, tons of them. And I gotta say, a humongous thanks to you for the support, and a big hello to Matthew there. Hello, Matthew. Hello.
Oh, hello there.
And a big hello
there.
to the chat. Oh, hello there. Let's say hello to the chat, Matthew. Oh, hello there. Hello there. Hope you're doing well. But a big thanks to all of y'all once again.
Konnichiwa.
Man, well, hang on. Dobre utre, bleh. I mean, like, dobre
What's up,
din.
Beijing?
Man, guten Tag. Let's see here. How do you say it in Italian? Oh man, I don't know. Like man, I don't know.
Arrivederci.
I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. But I know in French it's bonjour. Bonjour. Man, there we go. You got to get the southern drawl on that thing. But still, a big thanks to your support, John Garner. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from Wolfgang Olesh, and thank you, Wolfgang, for the 20. He said, I am curious, is Russia also using AI in their drones, or are the Russian drones only human-controlled when flown?
We understand that the drones on the Russian side may be autonomously piloted towards to their targets, but final impact is still done from what we know with the human operators. So that might be changing, but from what we know, that's largely the situation with the majority of their drone forces as we understand it. So big thanks to you so much for the support and help with this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Preston Mills said, I am right. It is arrivederci, or ciao. That's for the Italians, at least. But the next one here goes to Otani Sanji, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Otani, as well, for that support. They say, great reporting as always, guys. And people need to stay active members of the Republic. And keep up the strong work. And a few questions. Are we still in the 40-day offensive phase of Ukraine? And any significant Taiwan news in LSA?
Generally, there's not been a lot of significant Taiwan news lately. The situation has kind of returned back to status quo there. But as far as the 40-day drone strike campaign, we've actually gone beyond that at this point by about 10 days to 2 weeks. And the Ukrainians extended at the end of the 40-day drone campaign, largely an indefinite 40-day style drone attack campaign against the Russians. So at this point, they're conducting those styles of attacks nightly, indefinitely through the remainder of the conflict. So that's largely the situation that stands there. And thank you so much for the support and enjoying our reporting, Otania. And I hope that people do remain active participants and members of this republic. Very important thing to be involved in the nation and its best interests instead of just backing up blindly political groups. People have got to be independent and have to observe the situation outside of a political lens and see what's really going on and try and advocate for actions or change from that position, not from the position of being a party ideologue, which a lot of people do these days on the left and the right. And it's destructive because they have mostly no clue of what's good for the country. They just know what the party says is good for the country, which usually is never good for the country, actually, from what we see nowadays. So I would definitely agree with you. People need to be active members of the Republic and need to keep up with what's going on, especially around the world in foreign policy, which is a very important part of, I guess you could say, the situation in the country, which is never really thought about or covered much by people or looked at clinically. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support once again from John Garner. And thank you, John, for the second generous support of the night. He said, if I were to go back to school, I would want to learn more about myself so I could teach others. Honestly, John, that sounds like a school of life right there. Honestly, it sounds like just a school of hard knocks. Like that's sound like a life experience to me. Really, I'll be honest. The school never really taught me much about like life stuff at all. It just didn't for me. Maybe some people it worked like that, but it really didn't work like that for me. I've learned more just getting trial and error kind of going on and stuff like that. At least in my experience. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, yeah, school didn't really teach me much either. It kind of taught me math a little bit, but not too well because I never was that good at math. And honestly, I remember a lot of the teachers from back in the day, the math teachers after like middle school, and I remember that all of them were so rough at explaining how to actually do the math. I would never get it. Like, I would never get it. And you would try and ask them for help, and then they act like you're an inconvenience for asking them for help. And it's like, oh, well, whatever then. It's like, I guess your job is not to teach. I would honestly, folks, I kind of wish I had been a lot more vocal back then instead of just being, oh, okay, yeah, about everything. I wish I'd been like, well, so what the hell is your job? Like, to not teach? What is it? But beyond that, though, I didn't really learn a great deal in school academically or in actual life. Especially in high school. I think that was really the answer for both of us because they were trying to get everyone else up to speed with like ninth grade reading. And if you're at like 12th grade or college level reading, you're just kind of breezing through high school at that point. And also history. Oh my God, history was terrible. I remember there was one history teacher out of the 4 years I was in high school, folks, that actually knew what he was talking about. And he actually taught me a couple things I didn't know. The other 3 history teachers that I had were awful. Like, it was terrible. They would say things that were completely wrong historically all the time. And it's like, damn, it's like, I don't know how that could be. I mean, it's like, it's literally in the book, and they would literally go against the book. They'd be like, like you remember that one history teacher, Matthew, that said the United States invented the steam engine, the steam train, the propeller, and the propeller, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Oh man, that lady really got in your skin bad. You still remember that like it was yesterday.
It did, man, because everything she said was wrong. It was literally like history if you went out of your way to make everything wrong. Like it was like, oh, by the way, America was involved in the Christmas truce of 1914. We didn't even enter the war until late 1917. It's like, how were we there? It's like we weren't there. Or the War of 1812 was fought entirely on the Great Lakes. I guess we're completely forgetting the capital getting burned to the ground in the Battle of New Orleans. Completely forgetting that, or the treaty, like everything. Like honestly, man,
Yeah.
it was a mind warping that happened in that class.
Oh
Man, I was
yeah.
like, oh my god.
Yeah, really, honestly, for me, I just went with it. Like it also like a lot of the teachers would have stuff they would teach in class, and then the test would have a completely different answer on it or something like that. The right answer they taught in the class wouldn't even be on the test, multiple choice. It becomes like completely different options. I just learned how to play the game really well. Like I just learned how to like do process of elimination like really really well, and that's what made it easy for me. I had like honor roll pretty much every single time, not because necessarily they were teaching the right stuff. I just learned how to basically game the system really well.
Man, I think, man, honestly, man, we did quite well at that JLab team because of that as well, man. Because we both knew that common deduction to get to the answer, even if you didn't know it, and generally you could get really
Oh
reliable
no,
results with that.
no. I found the way. I was like, how do you take like what was the team size? Like 15 people or something like that? Was
Yeah,
that
something
it?
like that. I think it was,
Yeah,
no,
I think
I
it was
think it
like
was more like,
15.
I think it was more like 10 or 8 because it was like a 5-man or 4-man team, and we had 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm like, how do I? And because I was in charge of those teams, like the academic teams, stuff like that. I was like, how do I get these 10 like high school age people like actually sit here and actually learn this stuff to where we can actually win trophies? I'm like, let me just gamify the hell out of it. So it's like just making like what was known as Cahoots. It's like this interactive like multiple choice game where you can like compete against each other. I was like, I found out like if you make people compete against each other, like there's always a desire to like put other people down, especially amongst high schoolers. So that was like the easy way to get them to learn something. So I just did that for the entire training sessions that we'd have for that would hold after school. I'll just have them doing those Cahoots over and over and over, and we were literally killing it, man. We were winning trophies at every single competition we went to because of that.
I mean, honestly, but man, we both were doing pretty good before that as well. Remember, like in that first year when remember when you and me were like some of the top scoring people in that team, and then right before the state competition, they kicked me off of the team to put a friend on it, and I got screwed. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
We
That's
were
where I was in charge of it.
Yeah, we were doing pretty good then. It was trying to get some other folks on like on the page because man, some of those folks like they would bomb those things like they would bomb them if they didn't have like the learning material, which Randy did really good at coming up with. But also I saw someone say, let's see, where in the world was it? It's hold up, someone said, where in the world is it? Hold up, it was up here somewhere. Oh my god, it was something about the education system. Um, but I can't find it. I hate that. I actually had scrolled up to it and stayed on it for a minute, and then scrolled down to try and get the chat moving,
Oh, wait a
and
second.
it disappeared.
David Vanderbrook said the kids hated each other, but boy, did we win. LOL. Honestly, that was the first life lesson I learned. Hatred is a good motivator. It's a very unifying tool, and it's very dangerous too, because you can mislead the hell out of people. Telling them this is the bad group over here and this is the good group over here. It's like that's a very dangerous thing. Although I didn't make the kids hate each other; they hated each other regardless. It was just the way it was. Like there was a lot of a little bit of like little rows and stuff going on, but it wasn't too bad after that. It wasn't too bad. The trophies were coming in, and they were going in the trophy shelf, and then we never really got a shout out for it.
Man, that was such a slight as well. Like, folks, it was ridiculous because our little JLab teams, which are just taking tests, but they're really good at test taking and army knowledge or whatever the hell it was. We would always get like first or second place or second and third place with our 2 teams everywhere we went, but state. State was completely rigged. Like they just like selected people to win that. We would never win it, but we would always win first or second against all of those same teams everywhere we went. So anyways, when we would win first or second place, we also had in that group a drill team, a color guard team, and something else, like the PT people.
Exhibition.
Oh yeah, exhibition and the PT people. And if they won third place, they would like on the school intercom the next week on a Monday, because the competitions would be on a weekend. They would say, okay, so they got first place in track at the JRTC competition. They got third place at drill team, or they'd even just give a shout out to the drill team for participating, and also the color guard got third place. and that was it. They would never mention that the JLab teams that won first and second ever. It literally, like for some reason, no one would ever go and tell like the people who announced on the intercom, oh, by the way, like the JLab teams won first and second, by the way, again. Like no credit for that at all. It would just be trophy stacking up. Like there was a whole little case of them that we had won through the course of the years that we were there. No shout out at all over the school intercom for it, which I don't know why that slight was done, but it was one that both we, well, and not only we noticed, it was something that everyone on the JLab team noticed. Everyone was like, why in the world do we never get an announcement on the intercom that we're winning first and second, but if someone else wins third or just shows up, they get an announcement for that? What's up with that?
Yeah, I never knew. I guess I'll never know. I don't know. Like I think there was some friction between me and possibly some of the folks that had a hand in that. Maybe like there might have been some friction. Possibly it's just a hunch. I don't know that for certain. But you know, it seems kind of weird.
Yeah, it does seem weird. I still remember that, man. The first time we won first and second, there was no announcement. We were both like, what the hell? They gave everyone else an announcement for just showing up, and we didn't get a single one for winning. I think out of the whole 3 years I was in the program, and the whole 3 years Matthew was running the JLab team, I think there was only an announcement once that we won first or second. Every other time there was never an announcement. Like in the teams won first and second. There was never an announcement otherwise. But anyways, outside of that whole side note, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
And how does that make you feel?
Honestly, kind of looking back at how we were both treated, it makes me. I'll be honest with you, folks. It makes me kind of feel a little bit bitter because it's like, what the hell was up with that? It's like we didn't go around trying to create problems. I mean, we made good grades.
Why?
We always acted respectful to people, and it was like,
Why?
what's up with all the tough breaks?
Why does it make you feel better?
It makes me feel bitter because it's like why the hell was that? It's like I would go out of my way, and I know you went out of your way to always treat all of the teachers as respectful as possible, to try and like treat the other kids there as nice as we could, generally, although they would
So
still treat us like crap. It's like why in the world was that never reciprocated? Is my question.
So you feel like you weren't seen enough by the people. You didn't get reciprocation, and therefore that set you on a long life path of trying to find that reciprocation through one mean or another publicly.
No, not really. Like no, not really.
You
I
just
did.
don't want to admit it, but you'll admit it sooner or later.
Nah, nah. Honestly though, no. It's looking back at it, folks. For years, I would always try and go out of my way to be as nice as possible, even if they were crap to me, because I'd be like, oh, maybe I don't know what's going on with them. I've kind of gotten to the point, folks, over the years. I've kind of just gotten to this point where I'm like, if someone acts like an asshole, I'm just going to call them an asshole. I'm not going to try and still be nice to them. Like, well, maybe they're going through something. It's like, no, everyone goes through plenty. We're going through a lot all the time, and we have been. And it's like I would still treat people nice and not go my way to act like an ass. So it's like, if people can't, like, you get what you dish out, and if you can't dish out being nice to people, I don't act nice to those people. That's how I look at it now. Very
I didn't
different
even
mindset.
care. I didn't even care. Like, if for a minute it caused some anger, but like after that minute was up of like feeling slighted, I was like, apparently they know I won because they didn't mention it on purpose. Apparently, so apparently I got under their skin pretty good. I'll go win another time too to piss them off again. That's what I was thinking. And then I'll go win another time and piss them off again and again and again and again. I was like, there we go. That's the way to prove it.
Man, I mean, honestly, man, like that's I think that's how we both do it. But still, looking back at it though, like that would generally be my 2 cents. Anyways, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $10 support from Esteban Graves, and thank you, Esteban, for the 10, and we do appreciate that. It does not appear that he left a comment, though. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't think there is a comment to address here, but we do appreciate that. Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a big thanks to your support. You didn't throw in a comment, but your support helps us to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality every single day of the week. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 24 euro support from LSA EXE, and thank you for that support, by the way. Very interesting name you have there. They said, hello from Germany, and it's lovely to see so many Americans taking an interest in our corner of the world. I hope the EU becomes more independent so it can regain the respect of the US and NATO can remain a family.
And hopefully so. I would hope that we can eventually resecure our position as the United States, because otherwise we are slowly spiraling on the down and out, really by the people we're electing here in this country. In the last administration and this current one, they've done more damage to the United States of America than I really think we could have seen over the past 100 years up till then. But still, a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And excuse me, goodness. We also have a 10 here from old Marobert, who put in a 10. And thank you as well for that support. It said, hey, y'all, and when do you think a possible conflict with Russia will happen? And how will NATO handle the situation? And what are strategies for stopping Russia? And how will Putin and top brass get handled in LSA?
I would generally say that a conflict could happen at any point right now. Well, of course, it'll take Russian force buildups along the Baltics, but once we start to see that, it could happen at any point from there. When, it's hard to say exactly, but we're getting very close to it cracking out at any point. As far as what's going to happen in the aftermath, will like I could get into great detail of what we could do, but at this point we just have to hope and pray that the people at the very top, the civilian leadership, have an idea of what they're doing and what it actually means. And if they don't, we're completely screwed, which I don't really have a great deal of confidence in them at this point. So a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $5 support from I Will Eat Your Hot Dogs, and thank you for that support, by the way. They said, sir, is NATO making that 3-day war, sir? 3-day war, that's what they call it. 3 days, that's it. 3 days and finish the job. That's what they do, finish the job. Let's make a deal, deals. Oh, I love deals. Bring the big juicy worm, sir, that worm. You gotta bring around that big booty worm. You gotta love that big booty worm. Look at it. It's got a big juicy booty. Look at that thing. Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah.
Like, you gotta love the worm. It's a great worm, beautiful worm. Not many like it. Big booty worm, new term, just coined it. But I gotta thank you greatly for the support. And I gotta say that NATO is definitely going to be hoping to fight the war for only 3 days. Everyone knows that that's the greatest war plan, is a 3-day one, because nothing lasts short as 3 days. It always goes longer, and then it completely falls apart because we don't have a plan of what we're really doing. But I do have to say, great thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on air right now, keeping this thing running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Laser, who puts in a 5 and said, I think the U.S. leadership is desperate to leave NATO because they know in Article 5 is very close and they don't want to honor it.
I think even if they were in NATO, they just probably would try to not honor it for one reason or another, is what I'm thinking. But that might also be the case as well. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $5 support from Andrew Honeycutt, and thank you, good sir, as well for the 5. He said, the U.S. Navy is perhaps the best projection of force, and why is the Navy being neglected, overused, and underappreciated? The enforcers will elaborate in LSA.
It's because nobody likes to spend money on the Navy. Because nowadays, in modern popular culture, the Air Force is really looked at as the branch. So the Air Force is the one who gets the easiest funding for new aircraft, new systems, new facilities, so on and so forth. The Navy, on the other hand, you have to put out tremendous amounts of money, usually in tens of billions of dollars, to upkeep the shipyards, even if they're not building a ship, to build the ships that you would eventually need, and then to also maintain them. And all of that costs a humongous amount of money. In terms of cost consumptiveness, if we actually spent the money we needed to, the Navy would be the most cost-consumptive branch of the armed forces that exists. But its power projection is what really makes it worth its salt, and that's something that's completely misunderstood by modern politicians, because they just look at the Navy as a money sink. But in reality, the Navy allows for us, unlike every other branch, to have major control of shipping lanes globally, which is the source of all trade revenue for every country around the world, and thus by maintaining the Navy at the best standard that it can be and maintaining it as a large fleet in being, we can largely control the flow of money globally to any country on the planet. So that's generally why it's heavily underfunded. I mean, it's been underfunded forever, really ever since the end of the Second World War. No one really wants to put money into it, because even during the time of Ronald Reagan, there was a humongous amount of argument in the Republican Party at the time and the Democrat Party that, oh, we don't need to put money into the Navy, it's just so expensive to build new ships. And it's that kind of thinking that's lasted for decades now, 50 years, 60 really, that has put the Navy into a position to where we do not have any shipbuilders in the United States left that can build the vessels we need. That's why they're looking at having them built in a place like Japan. And also, a large amount of our vessels are not really maintained to an amazing standard. They're maintained to the minimum allowable standard, which then leads to a whole bunch of problems like we saw with the Lincoln when it's on a significantly long deployment. it's breaking down, I believe, from what I understand, at a rate that's faster than it's supposed to be anticipated because they're conducting preventative maintenance, which means that they're only repairing things that are broken, not things that are getting close to broken because the funding isn't really there for the Navy. And also, like the proof of that, I mean, like the proof of that alone is that look at the amount of carriers we have. Back in the day, like, you know, a lot of people always love to talk about, oh, Britain had 300 ships, now they have Navy. Look at the U.S. Navy. I mean, what was the number of ships that we had, in the 1970s? Let me go pull it up. How many ships did the U.S. Navy have in 1972? That's the last year we were heavily involved in the war in Vietnam. And we had, let's see, a total. Let's see here. Well, if it could eventually give me an answer. In 1972, the United States Navy had 654 ships. How many ships are in the U.S. Navy in 2026? And that number is now dropped down to 291. So we have about a third of the amount of ships that we had 50 years ago or so in the Navy today. And why is that? That's just because we do not want to throw the funding at them. We need more destroyers in particular. We need a humongous amount of missile destroyers like the Early Burks. We need more carriers. Not a humongous amount of them. I'm saying maybe about 5 more carrier strike groups would probably be sufficient because right now they're getting run to tatters because we don't have enough of them to cover all of our different global commands. But if we had 5 more aircraft carriers and we had about 50 to 60 more destroyers, Arleigh Burkes, than we have now, and we also maintained and upgraded the ones we have currently, we would be able to see that we would be able to keep every single force, or more so command theater in the world, or area of responsibility, well staffed with warships and carrier strike groups on hand and available for action, which is what we're currently not seeing right now. I gotta say, Andrew Honeycutt, that's the one thing that annoys me the most is that the Navy is so underappreciated and underfunded and undersupported these days. And that's something that I think needs to change tremendously in military thinking. If we're prioritizing anything in a peacetime setting for funding, it should be the Navy. Everything else should come second to the Navy. That's my personal opinion. But anyways, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have here a 10 from Game Theory. And thank you, Game Theory, for that $10 support. We do appreciate it. He said, Matt, you should see if Utah has classes for your motorcycle license. If in California, the CHP offers classes for 2 weeks length and you don't have to pass a test. And they do have classes for motorcycle licenses out here, but I could just take the normal straightforward test, and I could probably ace it. I was a pretty solid motorcycle rider when I used to ride motorcycles. I was pretty skilled at it actually. I've been riding for years. I just really hate they took the license away from simply moving from Alabama to Utah. I have no idea really why they even did that. It's like, why do I have to go back and get a learner's permit when I've been like an expert rider at that point, been riding for years. So it's just annoying, really. I just don't want to go through the process. And also another thing too, I just don't want to spend the money on a motorcycle, really. Truthfully speaking, it just seems like, an unnecessary expenditure to a large degree. So I just ride my bicycle. But Enforcer, what say you?
I mean, the bicycle is great, though. I mean, he gets around on that bicycle. I mean, he really does actually get around. He can go 15 miles on that thing. So he can basically go all the way to downtown just bicycling there and then ride the train back down, to basically wherever he's at. But beyond that, though, I would say generally I just would say I'm personally not really a motorcycle person. Motorcycle licenses are a waste of time for me because I'm never going to ride a motorcycle. It's just not really something that's incredibly interesting or fascinating to me. I more so just look at it as kind of a utilitarian sort of a thing. And when I think about transportation or moving around, I just think of the most efficient way to do it. So if I'm going out downtown, I'm taking the train. If I'm just trying to get around near to my house, I'm driving around in my car. That's how I look at it. That's also, folks, why I like the trains is because it's just an efficiency thing that you kind of get to beat the traffic. Because Matthew can tell y'all, folks, if you were trying to get to downtown in Salt Lake, the front runner is faster than the interstate almost every single day of the week because the interstate is packed to hell and basically gridlocked most of the day throughout the whole of Salt Lake. So the front runner
to drive good.
Man, what are you doing? Taking the shoulder? You just going 80 down the shoulder of the interstate?
I follow all the legal requirements.
Well, if the interstate's gridlocked, how are you beating that? I mean, if the interstate's just straight up locked up, no movement.
I just ungridlock it.
I'm built different. When the interstate's
Yeah.
gridlocked, I intervene.
I do something called a detour. I go around it.
Well, I mean, you only do that so much here in Salt Lake, and if you go around and you take, like, another street, I won't get into the specific streets, but if you take another street, you're just dealing with red lights all the way till downtown, which is slow as Christmas. So at that point, it's just more efficient to take the train because you can beat the red lights, you can beat the traffic, you can get straight to downtown and then straight back out, and the travel time's almost nothing. So I mean, I'll be straight up with y'all folks. That's why I like trains. It's just the raw efficiency of it. You can get from point A to point B as quickly and easily as possible. And you also don't have to worry about Utah drivers. Because I will say, folks, I love Salt Lake City and I love Utah. Great place. I think it is better than Alabama by a good bit. But one thing I will say that is actually worse out here is the drivers. The quality of the drivers out here is actually worse and they're a lot more dangerous. On the flip side, however, they are nowhere close to being as aggressive as Alabama drivers. Like they could almost like rear end you, or you could almost rear end them, and they're gonna be like, "Whoops," and that's it. In Alabama, they'd be like, "I'll get you, MFer." It's just like, oh, it's like now we're in a whole deal. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $5 support from Ulf Hednar, who said, part of the problem that the U.S. has right now is they only care about money and they can't fathom that people fight for ideology, honor, right and wrong, etc.
In a sense, I would say, yeah, in a way, I would agree with that. Because we have to stand with American principles. It's not about what do we get from people. So in a good sense, it's about who are we up against and who are we friends with. And I would rather be friends with anyone like Germany, France, Britain, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Canada than I would ever be friends with China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, or anyone else along that character or that vein, because those countries have a lot more morally in line with us than we have with any of these dictatorial or authoritarian countries in the world. And I would definitely agree with you. That's something that people need to start understanding in government these days as well, is that we don't just do things for the monetary side of things. We also do it for the moralistic side of things, and also in line with our national vision, which has been going for 250 years. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $5 support from Parbate Potato, who said, did you hear about the Doris Miller and how they want to rename it after the president?
Yeah, I did hear about that. They're trying to rename the Doris Miller, who was going to be named after a particular war hero. Let me go pull him up here really quickly for y'all. I'm sure y'all will actually know this picture because he was the first black sailor to ever receive the Navy Cross. This guy right here. I'm sure some of y'all have seen his picture before because his picture is usually shown in World War II documentaries. But they're actually planning on stripping his name from the ship that's going to be commissioned and just putting the president's name on it. I'm sure the president will say that he personally popped up out of the grave and was resurrected and say, "Oh yeah, I'm good with that," or something like that. It'll be something along those lines. But a little interesting how everything has to be renamed after the great leader. I've only seen that in a couple of places, folks. North Korea, Germany in a particular time, and the Soviet Union in other particular times. Seems kind of a little interesting to me. Not trying to make any on the nose sorts of comparisons there, but I am saying that why the hell does someone have to name everything after themselves when they're living? Like, does it really matter? It's like is like if you're the president of the United States, you're the president of the United States. No one can really take that away from you unless you're getting impeached for high crimes or treason. So it's like, what in the world is the point of going around and smacking your name on everything? It's like everybody already knows you're the president. You don't have to do anything farther to let people know. That's how I look at it. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $2 support from Real GSE Music, who said, I made it, guys, and Russia don't want none for real.
And they don't want it. They don't want it. Russia don't want none of that. They want all the smoke. They want the heat. They want everyone to give them their heaters. And I'm telling you, the way they're moving right now, they're about to be making NATO move like a Smith & Wesson. They're going to be moving like an invasive species. But a big thanks to you for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it looks like, folks, crazily enough, we are way ahead of time here in the questions segment. Actually, we have another super chat. What do we got, Matthew?
Also, I see Santa Fe Railroad said in the live chat, motorcycles are dangerous, Matthew. Better wait and get a car. I do have a car, but motorcycles are dangerous. But I mean, isn't that kind of like the appeal of the motorcycle, though? It's like it is a little bit dangerous. Like that, I don't know. Like this may sound psycho, but I'm like part of that's exciting. Like it's kind of like, am I gonna make it if I go out on the motorcycle today? I don't know. That sounds really bad, by the way. Yeah, hopefully in a place when you ride your motorcycle, it's not that dangerous. Hopefully, but the drivers have to be paying attention. And also lane filtering is legal out here in Utah apparently. So that's even adding another layer of danger to it. Somebody could not see you lane filtering down the middle of the lane and then side swipe you and knock you off the thing. I almost saw two motorcyclists get killed yesterday. Some car pulled out right in front of them. Somehow they dodged it somehow. So I was like, oh, geez. I'm like, really like in Utah, I don't know if I'd have a motorcycle because it seems like the drivers out here are pretty oblivious to a large degree, and it seems like it's only a matter of time.
Man, honestly, man, real. But with that, it's time for us to get on into the super chat here.
And the super chat goes to Eagleman, who put in a 5. And Eagleman said, a little biased being a Pole, but playing dumb to Russian attacks buys more time, whereas escalation plays into Russia's game, and LLT LSA.
Here's my question, though. Did that mindset help out Britain and France against Hitler and Germany before World War II? And the answer is no. Because while it could be said they're trying to buy time, what are they buying time for? For the Russians to get more ready to invade Poland or the Baltics? Or what? Because it's not really like the concept of just wasting time or buying time at this point isn't really doing anyone any good, just like it didn't do the Allies any good to just kind of sit around and wait Hitler out until he made the moves and he started his invasion of Poland and then later the invasion of France and steamrolled basically everyone on continental Europe. It doesn't really do anyone any favors to sit around and wait. If we know that something's coming around the corner, and this Russian government has made it incredibly clear that they have ambitions that include NATO in the future and that they're preparing for a confrontation with NATO right now over the situation in Ukraine, why would we wait? Like, it would be better to act now when they're in a position when they're unprepared, rather than letting them work on their own timetable to where they're eventually prepared, and then they attack you when they're ready, instead of you being ready to deal with them right now, or catching them off guard even while you're off guard. That's a more even playing field than having the Russians ready to invade a country, in some way, shape, or form, than not. So I do thank you for the support, but me personally, I'm not really in a concept of kind of sitting back and appeasing the Russians to buy time. That's what the Allies did leading up to World War II, and it didn't do any good for anyone. I'm more in the mindset of preemptively facing someone down and generally threatening them like the Russians to get them to back off and realize that we're going to catch them before they're actually ready. But a big thanks to you for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, I see who LFG in the chat said, you say that now, Enforcer Matt, about riding the motorcycles and the danger and, excitement of it, but wait until a wifey and kids come into the picture. Now, if that was the case, if one day I actually do get married, I would never do something like that. That would be just pure selfish and reckless to go out and do something dangerous like ride a motorcycle, kind of like a fool, and then have a wife and kids. That would be really stupid at that point to do that. So yeah, maybe my riding days might be numbered possibly. So maybe I want to get that in possibly while I can. But anyway, so moving into our live chat questions though, we're gonna go ahead and move right into those because we're out of super chats. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody for once again supporting the channel with those super chats, and we do appreciate that once again. And jumping right into our Morse code decoders, we have Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Heroy, Fluffiness, Kush, Commentary, Siren, and Brian. They said the Morse code says Russia just keeps pushing the envelope, trying to attack NATO without directly attacking an LLT LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that down on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. And I'm going to congratulate y'all greatly on getting that correct time and time again. Truly an amazing thing the Lee Springer Snow Corps has once again gotten that dead on the nail. And I got to say that we're always, honestly, I'm personally always blown away by the Morse code message being dead on the nail quite literally every single day. And so a tremendous thanks to y'all once again. And with that, it is now time for us to move on and into the live chats. And due to how quickly we're getting to them, folks, I think we can get to quite literally every single one that we have in the spreadsheet. So Matthew, what do we got?
So this one goes to David Tablet. He said, does the attack have to be successful that Russia conducts on NATO for NATO to declare Article 5?
Generally, with how they're treating things these days, probably so. But in reality, if they conduct an attack and it fails, that still is an attack against NATO, which is an Article 5 worthy sort of an invocation. But it's really up to how they want to interpret it, treat it, and then handle it. So, in realistic practice, they could respond even on a failed attack. In reality, though, they're probably going to sit there and wait for the attack to eventually be successful and then respond to that. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Danger, who said, if World War III started, would we face any danger on the homeland, USA?
There is some danger that we could face, cruise missile attacks being one of the largest ones, because Russian submarines, nuclear powered submarines, could make it all the way to the U.S. coast or near to the U.S. coast to be able to fire off cruise missiles at the eastern seaboard or the western seaboard of the United States, or maybe even further inland at that if they're able to get close enough. But generally, there wouldn't be a significant threat to the home front rather than maybe sporadic drone and cruise missile attacks that could be conducted by adversaries. So, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Flamehawk, who said, what will it take for the NATO members to learn that if you want to protect your civilians and infrastructure, you have to shoot down anything that flies into your airspace first?
I don't know what it's going to take to teach them that. I mean, that's just basic common sense, and they're not even willing to do that these days. I'm a big believer in militantly protecting airspace. So if something ever gets into it that's not supposed to be there, you shoot it down instantly. Like you don't allow it to fly around and do whatever it wants. That's incredibly dangerous. Could end up hitting people and hurting them even worse than shooting down instantly. So I don't know what it's going to take, but I hope that they would eventually learn about that soon and fast. So a big thanks to you once again for a great question there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Big, who said, hey, Matt, can a drone carry a nuclear warhead? And if so, how large? I don't think a nuclear warhead. I don't think a drone could carry that. Not even like the large, like heavy lifters. I don't think that could happen. There's always a risk that there could be, like for example, Iran. Iran sort of floated the idea of using like a dirty munition of sorts, which would be obviously a lot smaller. That's always a risk. But I don't think an actual warhead would fit on a drone. I don't think. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't think so either. I haven't really ever heard of a nuclear warhead being small enough to be carried on a drone or a drone being large enough to carry one. So I think the chances of that for now, luckily, are quite low. So I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from TS Actual, who said, starting to see signs that Putin's power could be waning. Not that he is losing power, etc., but he is more of a figurehead than before. And thoughts?
I would say that he's not really a figurehead. He's definitely got direct power, and he's still having people purged for really challenging his power. So I would say that he definitely has some direct power at this point. But I have a feeling that people's confidence in him is starting to wane to the point that he might be willing to take the dangerous enough action where they could rise up and possibly, do something to him, maybe. So I would say that that's more so the case than him being a figurehead. I would say that the risk of a coup or a government overthrow is increasing slowly yet surely with each bad decision and each bad month that keeps coming around in Russia. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, for everybody saying right there, people are saying, so you're saying the MQ-9 Reaper couldn't carry a nuke? Well, I don't think he was referring to like a full-size military drone like that. I mean, an MQ-9 is basically like an aircraft, like to a large degree. That's how large it is. So the way I took the question was he meant like a drone is in like a small like FPV or like a small like heavy lifter drone or something like that. That's the way I took it.
That's also the way I took it as well. That's what I was thinking. And also on top of that, if you put it on something like a Reaper's going to get shot down before it ever gets close enough to a target. And also, Reapers can only carry Hellfire missiles. And so far, I don't know of a single nuclear weapon in the modern American arsenal, or Russian arsenal for that matter, that could be carried on a missile as small as an AGM-114. So with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Andrew Honeycutt, who said, do you think Putler is insane enough to actually provoke a world war?
I think he might be desperate enough, and he's also insane enough. So with those two things combined, it could be a fatal combination, to put it that way. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, because I think there is actually a pretty decent risk of it with the Russians, me personally looking at what we're seeing right now. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a question from Enforcer Crow, who said, have we had any videos coming out of Kaliningrad, and how are they dealing with this war as far as fuel and food?
We haven't really heard a lot out of Kaliningrad. We do know that they've run into fuel shortages previously, but that's all we know, actually. There's not a lot of information that comes out of Kaliningrad on the by and by. So, sadly, it's kind of an informational black hole, Enforcer Crow. We'd sadly have to eat crow on that one. Get it? Because your name's Enforcer Crow? But beyond that, though, great question. Sadly, we just don't have enough information to really be able to answer it well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from WTF, who said, "What can we do as citizens to best prepare for what's to come?" Really, like, there's really not much that people can do to prepare, really. I mean, you could have, like, for example, like a small food supply in your pantry or something like that, but I wouldn't go overboard with it because, the food supply is not going to collapse completely, but it could have, like, shortages like Russia's experiencing, but it's not going to collapse completely. If that happened, we're in a state of anarchy at that point, so it doesn't matter how much you have stored up at that point, in my opinion. So there's a whole bunch of people out there that love to use that scenario to sell you like survival products and stuff like that, which I'll admit, like sometimes I even fall for it too, just because the marketing is pretty solid. But in reality though, it's really overkill. Like there's the whole bug out bag thing and stuff like that. If it's truly like a situation where it's like a full on like anarchy type situation, I don't think that stuff's going to do any good personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
If the nation completely fell apart, we are largely dead. Like most everyone who's watching right now will probably be dead very soon. You'll starve to death or something because there's just really not a way to prepare. I mean, you could prepare in a way for a nuclear attack. If you have like a basement or something, you can try and set up a inner core or refuge, as the British would call it, or you could try and set up a small bomb shelter. But even at that, most buildings are not fortified to be able to deal with that, and so you'll most likely get blown away if you're well within side of the blast radius. If you're outside the blast radius, you really don't even need to build one anyways, to be largely honest, unless you're concerned with fallout, which fallout isn't going to be happening in a lot of parts of the country. And outside of that, as far as the war situation is concerned, you kind of just really have to hope that the government is able to prepare and act properly. Like if we enter a world war, we would have to hope that they start rationing regiments at some point, where they ration food and whatnot to make sure that people are not panic buying and completely depriving the nation of its stockpiles of food and other sorts of resources. So really there isn't a whole lot to do. And for people who are like, "Oh no, I'm gonna like, go out in the woods, like if there's an apocalypse, I'm gonna be like the Gilly Man." Gilly Man's gonna starve to death and die in like a week, maybe 2 weeks. He might find water, but he's not going to find a lot of food because if like think about it, folks. There are millions of people, tens of millions of people in this country who have the idea that if the apocalypse comes, like a nuclear Armageddon, they're going to go out in the woods and they're going to go rock it out. If tens of millions of people are doing that, they're going to wipe out all of the wildlife pretty quickly. Because even in medieval times, they had to have royal lands to stop people from poaching. Because even back then, it was understood that if everybody living in Europe, which was hardly anybody at the time compared to what's there now or in America, if they all went out and just started to hunt and kill whatever they want and eat them, they're going to wipe everything out that's living before long in a couple of years. So that's why they had to stop people from going around hunting willy-nilly back then. And if people did that now, the same thing would happen and people are going to starve all the same. It's just that some people are going to prolong the inevitable. So, that would be my truth of it. Like, there's not really a whole lot to do to prepare. A lot of it would actually be quite simple, and a big part of it is just hoping that the government knows how to actually prepare and then enact these sorts of processes properly if we enter an emergency situation. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Solana, who said, "What do you think would happen to Kaliningrad when Russia loses in a future conflict? And do you think that one of the NATO nations would govern or break it up, etc.?"
I don't think anyone really wants it, me personally. I think it would stay Russian because there are no ethnic peoples there that are not Russian. They've all been Russified, or they have been kind of like forcefully relocated there during Stalin's time to turn it into a Russian enclave. And so I don't really think anyone would want it because you would have all of these ethnic issues that would come with it. Like if Poland took it, they're going to have all of these Russians who now have voting rights inside of Poland. That would be probably very politically unpopular. And also they could start possibly creating separatist movements and conducting terrorism in a place like Poland to try and become an independent region. If they got absorbed into Lithuania, Lithuania doesn't really even have a historical claim to the region. If anyone would have it, it would be Germany. And I don't really think Germany would want on them either, because once again, it would be taking a whole bunch of ethnic Russians in the millions and then plopping them into Germany with voting rights and whatnot, and that would probably be quite politically unpopular. So I think from the political side of things in Germany and Poland, they probably wouldn't want to bring them in just because it would start skewing the Bundestag in Germany, and also be skewing the Polish parliament as well, with the voting kind of representation they'd have, and also the kind of separatist violence that might come with them if they are extremely patriotic to Russia. So me personally, I think it will probably stay Russian. But Matthew, what do you think?
Me personally, I would have to say that honestly, I think I'd have to agree with you. I think it would stay Russian for the most part. I think it would.
You know, I saw someone say maybe they become an independent country. Maybe, but that would only succeed if they became kind of like an economic tax haven in a way, because they really don't have anything resource-wise. So they would have to be relying on becoming an economic hub. And I don't really know if anyone will look at Kaliningrad and go, yeah, this is a big economic hub, because it's kind of in the middle of just nowhere on the coastline in the Baltics, and there just isn't a lot of economic activity that passes through there. So they can't become a major container conveyor like, say, Singapore is or Hong Kong is. They really can't become a major financial hub unless if they were to start giving, say, like, significant privileges like the Swiss do, like, you know, offshore bank accounts with absolutely no tracking done whatsoever or any government filing. They maybe might become a financial center doing something like that, like the Swiss do or other countries like Hong Kong do. But I just don't really see it for them. I think they would probably also want to remain Russian as well, because if they ever tried to become independent, they would see that their kind of an outset is quite grim economically. There's not really a lot of economic activity going on there, and they kind of rely on Russia to just keep them alive and keep them on life support generally. But anyways, with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Old Warrior Fellow, who said, did they remove the nuclear fuel from the Nimitz?
I don't think they have yet. I'm not sure though. I like take this with a grain of salt. I don't think they have done that yet, but they might have. I'm kind of on the fence on that. So I hope that addresses that the best I can with my lack of knowledge there. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who's the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Marco. He said, are the Russians attacking supply routes into Ukraine as well?
Generally not quite. They don't attack them to the level that Ukraine does, because the Russians don't really have medium-range attack drones to be able to do that with. They have short-range attack drones, and they attack the final distributions to the front on the UGVs, the unmanned ground vehicles, and the armored cars, but they don't really conduct medium-range drone attacks on Ukrainian semi-trucks on major highways about 50 miles to 100 miles behind the lines, because they generally lack the ability to be able to do that at this moment. So the Ukrainians actually have an upper hand advantage in that regard. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to round out tonight's stream. And I've got to say, folks, it is shocking. It's only been a 3-hour and 3-minute long stream. I think this is one of the shortest ones that we have run in recent history. But I got to say that we are entirely honored and greatly appreciated to know that so many of y'all have been watching this show with us tonight. We've had 18.4 thousand people here at the peak and 119,000 people who have watched this show before it ended. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciated to know that so many of y'all have continued to watch this show over the years and still consider it to be your primary source of news. I hope we once again held our news reporting up to the Enforcer standard as usual, as we have for 4.5 years, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world, and if there is a short war video to be made, I'll be the one making that short war video. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava, long live the Spring Army, and we have one more super chat to address right here before I say goodnight. Eagleman7 threw in a 5 and said, 2 hours behind chat. Poland is $1 trillion economy now. Seb subs on the way, and 3 Arrow 140 frigates as well. Poles can play chess as well as the Russians. I'd actually agree. Poland is one of the largest military powers in Europe currently, and is quite a significant bulwark to see on NATO's eastern flank. But a huge thanks to you once again, and to everyone else, a good night, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, a big shout out to the over 119,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. A truly full house tonight, even with ending the stream early. That's a whopping amount of people. And we do appreciate you all for joining us once again. And I hope to see you all once again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next 24 hours of news to cover what's happening tomorrow as well. And maybe a short video midday if there is enough news to cover. But with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.